It is indeed a pleasure to have this privilege to play here for you. We intend to give you a very fine program, so just settle back, relax, and enjoy the moment.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm gonna start prompt. I'm gonna start nice and on time, punctuality. I need my viewers, my Twitch peeps, to hold me accountable. We're gonna step it up a little bit. Starting this week, this is an accountability statement. I know everybody is enjoying their day off. I don't know who might be able to wake up and join me this morning, but I'm here. What's up? What's up? Look, I got a new follower. What's up, new follower? Welcome to Mic'd Up in the Morning. I'm Mika Gadsden. What we attempt to do here, and I do mean we, I want to emphasize we, what we do here is take a closer look at our media landscape. Good morning, Nicole. Take a closer look at our media landscape. We dissect it, we distill it, we view the media, we view what's going on, current events, political events, all of that. We view that through a very specific lens, a lens that is focused on Black liberation, Gullah Geechee liberation, and all that jazz. I you're in the studio this morning. What up, Justin? Good morning. I love you. I love it. Yeah. So we're gonna step it up a little bit. I've been stepping up with being consistent. Good morning, Whiskey. Look at y'all. I'm imagining like most people, we're talking about Labor Day today, which is important because I know not everybody has the type of job where, you know, federal holidays, they have the day off. I get that. I used to be an executive in retail. I mean, I get it, right? But we're going to talk about Labor Day today, but I'm so happy to see my Twitch peeps show up this morning. All right, so we're going to be more concise moving forward. Again, to hop in to kind of go back to what I just opened up with, really want to be more consistent in the morning, really want to treat this like an AM show. I don't want to ramble so much. Look at me rambling now. Don't want to ramble so much in the beginning, want to hop into the content. And so we're going to do that. But I wanted to, again, cue up what we're going to talk about today. So as I teased out, if you got the newsletter this morning, cool. If you're not subscribed, right? If you are not subscribed, I do not inundate you with bullshit. I try not to do clickbaity shit. Sometimes I just want y'all to open the newsletter. And sometimes I get a little creative. But if you haven't read the newsletter, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'm getting a lot of unsubscribes. So not a lot. Let me not emphasize that. I'm getting a lot of interest and people have given me great feedback on the newsletter. And as I work to make that more consistent and make it more navigable, I really hope people understand what I'm trying to do here. So go to Instagram, go to the link tree, and the link is in my bio, both on my personal account and Charleston Activist Network. Go ahead and sign up for the newsletter so you can at least understand or know or get a heads up on what we're going to be talking about each morning and all that. And then Sundays, when I'm committing to on Sundays, I'll do a weekly roundup where you can access most, if not all, of the live streams from the previous week. All right. So check it. Labor Day. We're going to get into the meaning of Labor Day, traditional and extra spicy. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've always been very enthusiastic about sharing Black and Gullah Geechee folks' contributions to Labor Day, to the workplace, to organized labor. I've shared the cigar factory history, the MUSC Workers Strike, and most recently, shout out to my mans and them, shout out to Nick, who put me on to the Charleston Five last year, and I shared that documentary. We're going to revisit much of that content again, but what I'm swirling in the mix this year is we're going to talk about rebellions that took place on labor camps, right? We're going to talk about the enslaved populations here rising up, not just here in South Carolina, but in the South. We're going to cover a couple of slave rebellions, but we're going to talk about that. And you're like, well, Mika, wait, that's not a, they didn't clock in, they didn't get paid for the labor. Exactly, right? So this is exploited labor. But why I thought it was important, I thought it was important for me, and historians can check me, people who love history can check me, people who study and who are in that realm of working to help unionize folks, teach people about organized labor. Y'all can check me on this, but what I'm choosing to do is talk about slave rebellions and revolts as some of our first examples of organized labor. Now, the use of weapons and blood and also ultimately bloodshed, I know might complicate things for folks. But these are people who were not just exploited for their labor, people who were brutalized, who were abused, people whose families were separated. There's so many really inhumane, disgusting, despicable conditions that enslaved populations had to contend with, and where they viewed the only recourse to be, the use of force to achieve a certain level of freedom and liberation. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to unpack that, and I'm going to choose to, in this context, I'm going to choose to examine that as some of the first iterations of organized labor rising up to say no more, right? No more brutality, no more abuse, no more murder, no more rape, no more sexual assault. Enough is enough. We are human. And so we're going to look into it. So that's the little remix. Usually I do the whole traditional black people striking here, black people standing up for themselves there, which is cool. And we need to continually lift up the work, black-led organized labor movements. We need to lift up how predominantly black women and some white women and some white men and some black men, but predominantly how black women have fought to organize labor here in Charleston. MUSC Strike and Cigar Factory come to mind most of all. And then we're going to talk about the ILA as well. All right. So cool. So we at 7:37, 7 minutes in. Cool. What I'm going to do is do a look before I switch the camera. Take a look at the local headlines. Let me move this over. Y'all know my mouse be tripping. My mouse be over here like, nah. All right, I'm going to take a look at the headlines from the Charlotte Observer, the State Newspaper, and the Post and Courier. Let me go ahead and switch that up. Good morning, D. Bartlett, if I didn't say that. Good morning. See y'all. Thank you for joining me on Labor Day. All right. So here we go. So this why I felt okay. So this is what I also want to talk about. We're gonna get to the Murdaugh stuff. I have not been avoiding the Murdaugh stuff at all. I haven't been avoiding it. I just don't like true crime, right? Don't like true crime, none of that. Because I think true crime, that whole genre of podcast, while initially I was into it, I realized real quick, like these white voices were lifting up and glorifying murder in a way that was so just seedy, and like turning it into like this whole fandom, like the most popular one, How Not to Get Murdered or something, or whatever. I don't know, whatever, what they call their fan base, murderinos. I'll be damned if I even like, I have a name, an affectionate name for you all who subscribe, who follow me, who really support this content, and I would never choose a nickname. I hope I wouldn't choose a nickname steeped in homicide and death and destruction. And it shows you, like, I'm sorry, y'all, this is like, that's like, to me, has such roots in white supremacy to applaud and to commodify murder in these salacious ways. And so I see that happening with the Murdaugh family and all that crap. You see the other the medium-sized bear, I call them like Little Bear, Big Bear, and all that. The big bears were Randolph and Buster, right? So medium-sized bear or Little Bear, Alex, was supposedly shot at, somebody shot at him. He said he was having car trouble. He was shot at. I don't know. Some of this stuff is so gnarly and unbelievable that I don't even want to dignify. But the other part that what I'm really interested in, though, if you want to jump into murders, right? If you want to jump into discussing, hey, Joni, good morning, discussing murders and all that other stuff, I'm really more fascinated and interested in discussing the people that the Murdaugh family sent to the electric chair. Combined, I think Buster and Randolph, these are the old bears that Buster, whatever. One of them just died. They all kind of like passed down the same name. I got confused as hell last night looking in newspaper clippings from the 1930s and 1940s featuring them. But they over 86 years, the Murdaughs were prosecutors in Hampton County. And so they prosecuted, I believe what I read in Island Packet, they prosecuted 200 murder cases. I'm more interested in going through those cases and seeing which ones were like little suspect, and also which cases they decided not to prosecute. Like last night, I found a case from the 1930s where I believe 1930s, where they refused to prosecute a black man was killed by a white game warden, and the black man was a preacher, and there's really little to be said about Mr. Ori Taylor, the black man that died at the hands of this white man. You just have white witnesses saying, oh yeah, he raised his gun and he had to shoot. I'm more interested in discussing that, like how they prosecuted the crimes in Hampton County. Was there a disparity? Were black people being prosecuted disproportionately? Were cases involving white assailants or white alleged criminals, were those cases less likely to be prosecuted? I'm more interested in that. So if you want to talk about true crime, I want to know about the true crime of perhaps a disparity in terms of what crimes were prosecuted. I had to get that out the way. I thought that was important because Murdaugh took up the front page of today and yesterday's paper, the Sunday Post and Courier. But what I thought was interesting about today, bringing it back to Labor Day, what I thought it was interesting about today in the front page, on the front page of the Post and Courier, was this point of pride. It emphasized Charleston's waterfront, and I'm just going to read it. Port of pride, Charleston's waterfront, an economic lifeline for generations of families, but the face of the workforce is changing. So I'm assuming they mean something about, I don't know, identity, ethnic identity. We know that this is the ILA and the ports have been at the center of so much, I don't even say controversy, but we know that South Carolina is an anti-union state. We know Nikki Haley and her predecessors and her successor, McMaster, have all been vocal. Her Republican predecessors have been very vocal about busting up the unions like the ILA. Not only is this port, not only does this port have a lot of political power in being unionized, it also is predominantly black in terms of its workforce. And so that right there, you have quite a bit of political power and political potency that folks have been trying to bust up forever. And remember, anti-union sentiment is steeped in white supremacy, in that it's usually or largely informed by racial animus. And if not racial animus directly, historically, we see that other immigrant populations that came here, they were discriminated against, right? We're talking about the Italians, we're talking about the Jewish, talking about the Irish, right? We can go on and on. And it wasn't until they let those groups, those European groups, into whiteness, right? Remember, Irish and the Italians were treated as an ethnic group, right? And Jewish folks as well, right? Until they wanted to really kind of keep this caste system in place where black and brown people were subjugated, right? So they kind of okay, you can enjoy some whiteness, you can enjoy, this distinction and this privilege, right? And I'm saying all that to say that because those other ethnic groups also advocated for labor rights, rights in the workplace, right? And so a lot of what we've seen in terms of opposition to organized labor at Boeing, at these car manufacturing plants, so on and so forth, largely informed by racial animus. In fact, we'll be looking at the ILA again, cigar factory, and the MUSC workers strike, which were led by black people. And so that goes to show you that anti-union sentiment is steeped in something other than just, we don't want to pay folks, right? It's steeped in racial animus, and also just trying to keep a certain class of people, a certain race of people in a certain kind of class, right? Maintaining that caste system. Let me look at the chat over here in Twitch. Good morning. You said good morning, Johnny. Nicole, you said it felt icky to you too. Right? The whole genre, the whole murder, right? The true crime podcast, right? The story had no choice but to be salacious, honestly. I got you, Joni. Just commenting on the Murdaugh stuff. I got y'all. All right, let's look at the front page of another paper. This is the Charlotte Observer. Pat me on the back. Pat me on the back. Applaud for me at home. I finally figured out how to unsubscribe from this paper, and they are relentless. Next up, I got to do the Fortune magazine and the state newspaper. Got to unsubscribe ASAP. All right, so this is the front page, Charlotte Observer. Outside of this fake ass Google topper, this is a McClatchy paper, y'all. Outside of this little topper trying to copy, I guess, Google. You know how Google changes its little images depending on the holiday or the day of the month. I was very disappointed in the front page of the Charlotte Observer. Whiskey Neek, check your paper. All right, NC sent millions. But this is interesting though. I am gonna dig into this. Even though this is not South Carolina. Maybe when Anna Marks and them join me back we jump back into education, because it's coming. That live stream is coming. Another one. I am gonna look into that story. Outside of that, of course, I think that the Hurricane Ida news and whatnot is important, right? Right, Nicole? That's how people are rebounding or finding help and resources, rebounding from a Hurricane Ida. I think that is important. But I see nothing about labor, right? So boom, just wanted to share that paper. And then of course another McClatchy paper, the state newspaper, our state newspaper here in South Carolina, again, the Fugazi Google-esque topper. But there's another story I'm gonna keep my eye on. We're not gonna talk about it today, but we're gonna get into this story here, written by Caitlin Bird. Shout out Caitlin Bird. Charleston jail paying inmates. She has some quotes here directly from the newly elected, or relatively newly elected Sheriff Kristen Graziano, about the incentives they're offering up to inmates. You already know my wheels are turning. I don't want us to just see this as a net positive. I want us to understand what this means, offering a financial incentive to people who are probably largely deprived resources. I'm going to look into that. My gut is telling me that I don't know that this could mean more money poured into the jail system. This also could mean the jail is occupying a space that they're not qualified to occupy in terms of health and safety. Also, too, we know that largely when things like this make the news, it has a PR element to it, so it gives the appearance that Graziano's on the right path. And I'm not one to begrudge her of any positive thing she's doing. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I want to dissect the empty calorie bullshit work from this is substantive, this is important, this is actually going to yield a positive outcome, right? I want to take my time with it. So I'm going to read this later, but I wanted to put this on your radar that there's a big front page above the fold story written by Caitlin Bird regarding Charleston jail paying inmates to get vaccinated. Okay. And then you scroll down, you got more about the vaccine here. South Carolina college that require vaccines for employees and athletes has few cases, right? Then you scroll down again. I love that the state newspaper is focusing on COVID and its impact on our children. I think it's critical. The young 12-year-old girl that was intubated in MUSC has been removed from the ventilator. That was in another story I read yesterday. And so it's just a reminder that COVID is impacting our children, even though the naysayers and the unmaskers are saying otherwise, right? So pediatrician shares advice on keeping children safe from COVID. So I would say that front page of the Post and Courier and the state newspaper are giving us some good noteworthy things to read. All right, let me look at this. 20 minutes in. Cool. About 20 minutes and 19 minutes in. I want to go ahead. I debated about this. I debated in my head earlier, like months ago. Y'all remember how I used to start off with Jared Smith, I believe. Yeah, I think that's Jared's last name. Charleston weather content. I think I'm gonna go back to it because it's locally sourced, it's trustworthy, right? I want to go back to it because I do want this to be more of a morning show. I ain't doing traffic, but I wanted to at least to get to Jared's content and to use it more often. Let me see right here. Let's go to his website. All right. So we used to do this all the time early up on Mic'd Up. Let's go back. Let's bring it back. I just stopped because sometimes I just think about, I'm lifting up other people's content. And if I believe in it and if I trust it, there's no problem. But I was just thinking about it. I don't know. I'm going through my own head right now. Like, Yeah, I mean, anyway, so today, mostly clear, 73 degrees right now. It's been really nice. These mornings have been great. Humidity is up there already, though. All right, today, sunny, high in the upper 80s. Make sure you get out and get some vitamin D if you can. Enjoy this day off. If you have the day off, if you have that luxury. All right, so check it. Let's go ahead. Shout out to the homie Jared for his work, Charleston Weather. I'm going to close that out. And we're going to get to Labor Day. Yeah, 20 minutes. Here we go. So let's talk about, I guess, a real basic. I wanted to do just a really basic, quick history of Labor Day, something that you would get in your classrooms, in most classrooms, right? Let me see what's going on over here in the chat. Okay, Whiskey Neat, you said you on it in terms of your paper. And then Nicole, you said, just got a phone call last night. Someone has COVID at your son's kindergarten class. So now they are, and you're saying, have to quarantine, right? Feels like New Jersey outside, almost sweater weather, a little bit. It's going to be hoodie season for Mic'd Up. For Mic'd Up viewers, hoodie season. All right. Yep. Yeah, and to echo what Whiskey Neat just dropped in there, I really do hope that your kids and their classmates and the school at large, I hope that they are, I hope that the entire school is safe. It's really heartbreaking. All right, 2144. Let's hop into it. The history of Labor Day.
To Prime Minister John McDonnell's home.
I would probably say it's on History.
Modernized the United.
It's on History Channel, so it's probably largely unoffensive, right? So we'll hop into this and then we'll get into what I think is important to think about on days like that, on holidays like today, okay? Let's let it rock.
The Industrial Revolution modernized the United States and Canada during the 19th century. As people enjoyed steady employment, they compromised their rights in the workplace. Longer work hours and pay cuts were imposed. U.S. labor groups began protecting themselves by unionizing. In Canada, unions were illegal until 1872, when thousands of Ottawa laborers marched to Prime Minister John McDonnell's home. That year, Canada wiped the anti-union law from its books, and the march became an annual Canadian tradition. In 1882, Toronto labor officials invited an American union leader, Peter J. Maguire, to Toronto's labor celebrations. Maguire was so impressed that he suggested a workers' parade to New York City's Central Labor Union. He chose September 5th as the date because it filled the long void between July 4th and Thanksgiving. Coincidentally, that same year, a machinist from Paterson, New Jersey, Matthew Maguire, also proposed a laborers' celebration.
I don't know who that is.
On Tuesday, September 5th, 1882, thousands of New York City laborers marched from City Hall to Union Square. They gathered in Reservoir Park for an afternoon of picnics, concerts, and speeches, rallying for an 8-hour workday. 2 years later, the Central Labor Union moved the parade to the first Monday in September. They also encouraged all U.S. cities to follow New York's lead and march for the working man's holiday. For many, the choice was to either spend the day at work or march without pay. That began to change when Oregon became the first state to legalize the Labor Day holiday in 1887. Other states, including New York, soon followed. It took a political disaster to put Labor Day on the national calendar.
It typically does.
In 1894, railway workers in Pullman, Illinois went on strike to protest wage cuts. President Grover Cleveland faced pressure to end the demonstrations and sent 12,000 federal troops to break the strike. Violence erupted. 2 strikers were killed, and Cleveland's harsh methods made headlines. In an attempt to appease the nation's workers, he signed a bill to make Labor Day a federal holiday. Cleveland still lost that year's election. America's workers continued to gain power through the 1950s, when over 1/3 of all labor forces were unionized.
Y'all notice anything about this footage? Drop in the chat if you can chat, if you're not busy doing art stuff, Nicole. If you're not busy pouring cereal and making breakfast, drop in the chat what you observe about this footage.
Labor Day had become a time to rally workers for safer conditions, fair pay, and benefits. But in the second half of the 20th century, the U.S. labor force diminished. Many factories closed. Jobs were outsourced to other countries. Today, workers still parade through blue-collar neighborhoods on Labor Day, and speeches unite the ever-dwindling labor force. But the day's true call has quieted. For now, most Americans leisurely enjoy the holiday as summer's last battle.
Right. I'm glad they did the that dismount was funky. I like that. Because yes, I'm eating candy at 7:55 a.m. What I liked about that dismount was that it talked about now we don't even really acknowledge Labor Day for what it was, just like Memorial Day, any holiday. Shoot, July 4th, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. We always kind of conflate with Veterans Day with Memorial Day. I used to. You know, we look at some of these holidays as a day off, and I get it. That shows you how hard I think American capitalism just, you know what I mean, we just be trying to escape. You know what I mean? Thank you, Joni. You were driving, but yes, that's a good guess. And Whiskey Neat co-signs you, Joni. You got it. Ding, ding, ding. I showed the video, the question I asked earlier. What do you observe about the video? But it's acknowledging homogenous, mostly all white workforce, white women on the assembly line, white men in factories, right? So yeah. And that's the type of Labor Day history you probably were presented with. If you're my age, that's the type of Labor Day history I was presented with as a young person, right? I know I'm going all over the place, but it's okay. We're gonna get to everything. Right. But we've definitely gotten away from the true importance of this holiday. And I think if you live in a place like the South, the Black Belt, it's important to lift up the workforces that aren't acknowledged. And again, that's why it's important also to emphasize and to discuss rebellion. I thought this CNN clip right here is 2 minutes long. Let's let it rock, because this talks about the violent beginnings. In the History Channel video that we just played, kind of talked about it, touched on like disasters and how like vicious ways that the government tried to break up organized labor strikes and whatnot. But let's talk about this is shorter than the last video we just watched or listened to, depending on where you at right now. But let's watch this old clip from CNN Business, and then we're gonna get into some blackity black blackity extra black content. Right? But we're gonna talk about that Pullman strike of 1894 that the History Channel reference real quick.
So that
okay, let me pause it and rewind it. Boom, boom.
In the early 1880s, labor conditions were pretty hard. A lot of new immigrants were coming to America. They were reasonably unskilled, but often quite cheap labor, and they were
we're gonna banish the word unskilled from now on. Whenever you're talking about ethnic groups or immigrant class, black people, we keep calling them unskilled. They're not unskilled. Just like my ancestors, like a historian, I can't remember her name at the moment, but she spoke at the 1619, like when they first launched the whole initiative. She spoke at the programming, and she said that, black people, the enslaved African people that were captured, came with empty pockets, but they didn't come with empty heads. And I'd extend that, of course, to other classes of people who also came here, who were discriminated because of where they came from, who were European and who enjoy whiteness now, yes, but when they came here, they were discriminated against and they faced a lot of bigotry, and so their work was considered unskilled. Chill out with that unskilled bullshit. Don't repeat. If you hear anyone say that, check them on that. Check them real quick. I'm like, nah, they wasn't unskilled. They, they were skilled. They had skills. Whether or not America wanted to tap into it and pay them for it is another question.
Exploited for such, so that the typical workday could be 12 hours. They often worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week.
Definitely exploited.
Child labor was not allowed, but it wasn't regulated, and so kids as young as 6, 7, 8, 10 worked in the mills, and the conditions were not terribly safe. There were terrible accidents that occurred. The first Labor Day was September 1882. The founder probably was Matthew McGuire. He helped organize a major march and demonstration to affirm labor's rights. And 10,000 people marched. That was a Tuesday. It was the first Tuesday in September. What triggered a national Labor Day in 1894 was a rather dramatic strike that took place The Pullman workers in Chicago went out on strike. The federal government intervened because the Pullman cars, basically, with a boycott of them, stopped the American railway system from operating.
Okay, pause right there. The government intervened, right, to put down this strike, right, because the Pullman workers understood that they control commerce, right, being that they worked on this major transit system, or this major, transportation system, I should say. So government, I want you to keep that in your mind. Government intervened to put down a strike, and they responded with brutality and gratuitous use of force.
So the federal troops were called out to crush the strike.
That's
People
bananas.
were killed. It was a terribly violent strike. It was not a happy day for labor. Government, being politicians, wanted labor on their side, and so as a concession, they then passed legislation authorizing a Labor Day. First Monday in September from then on. Labor Day has evolved since 1894. Increasingly, even the marches and the parades became really opportunities for a patriotic holiday more than actually a celebration of labor per se.
But the union makes
Willie.
strong.
We have paid holidays because of the labor movement. We have a 8-hour day because of the labor movement. We have paid vacations because of a labor movement.
Come on.
We have health care, those of us who still have it, because of the labor movement.
And let me pause it right there again. I'm glad that he's rattling off all these reasons, all these things that we now enjoy, or we're supposed to enjoy. And now that I live in an at-will employment state, right? This is my first time. I mean, I've worked here. Y'all know my first jobs were here in West Ashley and whatnot as a kid. But since I moved here in 2014, this is the first time as an adult that I'm here, and I'm navigating what it means to work. What it means to work in a state like this. And y'all know what just happened to me recently. My social justice employer exploited these weekend labor laws to terminate my employment abruptly, right? With little recourse. And so I'm glad that he's rattling it off. Because it's really important to understand in a state like this that's anti-organized labor, anti-union, right? Anti-workers' rights, anti-workers, anything, anti-healthcare. It's important to understand why organized labor should not be demonized the way it is. And it's so funny, like I said, after 2 planes dropped out the sky and Boeing, I don't know how that workforce didn't unionize. Like that, they had so much leverage. I would think from a personal liability standpoint, I wouldn't want to be associated with a place that prioritized speed, right, over safety, their safety and the safety of folks who will be flying on those airplanes. I don't know why or how that political moment, that incident, and not to politicize people's deaths, right, the tragic deaths of a bunch of scores of people, but like. I guess the larger point I'm trying to make is that shows you the sentiments, the anti-union sentiments, how deep they run among people here that don't even contemplate. They don't even contemplate union. Not what they did. They almost succumb to unionization. But it's amazing how resistant folks are in the South, not just here in South Carolina, but in Alabama as well, where they tried to unionize at the Amazon distribution center, right? And how much money and resources these behemoths, these multi-billion dollar industries, how much resources they have to pour into, shout out to the sub, pour into busting up these organized labor movements. Nicole, you dropped something in the chat a couple minutes ago here on Twitch. You says, yup. When my mom and grandparents immigrated here from Italy, there was still a ton of bigotry. I can imagine. I didn't know your immigrant story. Thank you for sharing it. Your family's immigrant story. So much so that my mom never taught us Italian because it was negative in her eyes to speak it. And that's real. And see, that's something that's an Italian perspective. I've heard that from folks whose parents immigrated from Spanish-speaking countries as well. Sometimes from the continent of Africa. They don't teach their kids that language because it's largely looked down upon. And same thing with Gullah Geechee language here, right? And it's amazing what we do with race, ethnicity, nationality. It's amazing how fluid some of it is. And it's amazing also how universal or how many parallels there are between the immigrant struggle and some of the struggles between black and brown people or indigenous folks here. Some of those similarities stop abruptly at certain points, you know, but there is some universal experiences there that a lot of folks can relate to in terms of facing bigotry when you come here and you speak a different language, right? And enduring all these horrible slurs and whatnot. But anyway, I digress. Let me let the rest of this video play. I wanted to again emphasize the importance of hearing the things that we now enjoy. And how do we get, I guess the question to you all is, and it's a rhetorical question, how do we get people to view, you know, these moments and these movements as things that we should celebrate more, not just the day off, not just the day at the beach, not just the end of summer, not just the end of wearing white or whatever, whatever how that thing is, but how do we connect people back to the original meaning and purpose of Labor Day and get people to think more favorably about organized labor efforts?
And it's a chance really to recognize those kinds of games. But over time, it's become much more than that. It has become, for all of us, the marker of the end of summer, the beginning of school, an opportunity for picnics, for barbecues. In its own way, ironically, Labor Day is as much about consumption as it is about labor nowadays.
Yeah.
I'd like to
think capitalism.
That the problems facing labor and unemployment are on people's minds. I'm sure that they are on people's minds. I'm not sure that Labor Day is triggering those concerns anymore. And that's unfortunate.
That is unfortunate. Again, both of those videos ended in a way that are very appropriate. In terms of like what our connection is. Now let's get blackity black. So as you can see, right, I don't know if you can see, I don't know if you can, I'm going to describe it for those who are listening and driving and doing all things on my video. So last night as I was trying, I've got printed material to share, but what makes Twitch fun is that we can use videos, right? Of course. So I went down this rabbit hole of like black culture and things that are unique to this region, things that have emerged from Gullah Geechee experiences here in the Low Country. And I want to tie that again. Usually I talk about the organized labor movements of the MUSC Strike, Charleston Five, Cigar Factory. This year, I want to talk about Black labor in the form also of cultural contributions. And I want to talk about Black labor or Black rebellion, historic Black rebellion, as some of our first examples of organized labor of a workforce, an exploited workforce that had no rights, exploited workforce that was seen almost completely as subhuman and not eligible to enjoy certain rights and freedoms, the same rights and freedoms that our forefathers, I'm gonna use air quotes, that, let me say y'all forefathers, because they're not my forefathers, but those same rights and freedoms that they supposedly founded this country on. We know we've had that bubble pop years ago. I hope you have. When we read some of the things that our nation's forefathers used to say about Black people and not acknowledging them as full human, as full men, right? So we know that Black people wouldn't be extended certain rights, certain they just wouldn't be looked upon as people that need to be prioritized in terms of health and safety, right? They're here just for one thing. So I wanted to talk about culture because the culture also, to me, is labor. And a lot of our culture that's celebrated, whether it's Philip Simmons and his beautiful mastery of gate making, or whether it's the Sweetgrass Baskets weavers, that is seen as like more of a tourism, I guess, notable tourist I guess a notable tourism draw, right? Go see the sweetgrass baskets. Go look at the booths along Highway 17. The Philip Simmons gates are throughout the state, at the State Museum in Myrtle Beach, perhaps at the Hall of Fame. I don't know, whatever. Downtown, the airport, and everything. But we don't really look at that work and associate it with labor. And I want to make that connection as well. It may feel like a reach to people, but I hope you're tracking with me. I think it's important to see how Black folks' emotional labor has also been under-recognized and not seen as something that we should pay homage to in terms of making this place the special place that it is, right? What up, Justin? Justin, you just dropped something in the chat. Good morning, D. Your granddad worked for Cryovac in Simpsonville his entire career. Dad has been a laborer all his life. And all I can remember, Justin is saying, all I can remember is Dad being anti-union. I never understood why after I started learning for myself, right? The propaganda is strong as like an understatement. You are 100% right. What's that other, is it Milligan or Milliken? The Milliken factory, the textile factory, y'all drop that in the chat too. Like, I want to dig into their work too, because, dealing with chemicals and all that other stuff. I really want to know about like their history. If anyone knows anything about the Millikens, yeah. KCJ 18 always off the turnbuckle with it. I want to know more about the Milliken, Milliken, history of workers and all that. Jessica, good morning. Buenos dias. Si se puede. Labor built this republic. That's right. Labor shall rule it. Fight for 15, right? Happy Labor Day. That's right. Let's connect Labor Day to what it really is about. I'm clapping like Nicole in the chat. All right, let's get it. Good morning to everybody. All right, so what I wanted to do, again, Rebellion. I found some new content. I don't know about it because y'all know I don't like the memification and the oversimplification of Black stuff. Yeah, I don't do it. That's why I've really taken a step back from Instagram. I'm not interested in creating meme-like content so white people can just find it palatable and extra shareable. I really do want to confound. I want to complicate. I want to disrupt. I want to make people uncomfortable with my content because I'm interrogating, the way power moves in this area. But I say all that to say I found it's new-ish. It's got some people in there that's connected to some really, got some people blue check Twitter connections. So this ain't like grassroots or nothing like that, but it's called Crash Course. And again, I'm on the fence about like the whole memification of Black shit, but we're going to get into the Stoner Rebellion, right? But let's look first into like why slaves would rebel. And we're gonna look into the Stoner Rebellion specifically because it's relevant to this region. But let's look into why slaves rebel. Right? 3 times American slaves did rebel, and then we're gonna get into that content I said I didn't know about, like that I was unsure about. We're gonna get to that secondly. But this one is from the root. This one I'm okay with. This content I'm cool with. Hold on, let me pause it. I hate that it play. I guess I can change the settings where it doesn't autoplay. I'll get there one day, guys. I'll get there one day.
So there's been a lot of talk about Black folks and slavery lately.
You got that right,
For the record, enslaved Africans did not choose to be shackled, torn from their families, then bought and sold in the U.S. only to be tortured by slave owners.
So this video was made. I'm going to rewind it because I talked over it. Shout out, D. Shout out, D, for your comment. But like, this must have dropped around the time with Kanye, who was unwell. And I won't really talk about Kanye on this platform unless we're talking about mental illness, because I really think that we keep viewing Kanye through the lens of how we met him. Kanye is unwell, but I will reference him in this specific context because this must have dropped when he came out and said slavery was a choice. And when Kanye in his unwell manic state said this, right, I think a lot of people, what Kanye offers up in his most manic states, he offers up this really simplistic anti-Black commentary, which is very, very, very I got bipolar too, right? I've suffered from mania. Shit, I've been on one of these live streams and I've been in a full manic swing, right? But my mania doesn't manifest in like idiotic, violent. Like, it doesn't. So some of me thinks that that's just Kanye, that's him at his core. It's like when like older white people get dementia or Alzheimer's and they are racist toward the caregivers at the homes that they might, like, it's like, damn, y'all forget everything but the racism. I don't know. I feel like with Kanye, I'm like, damn, you're in a manic state, but this anti-black stuff seems like it's bone deep, like it's marrow deep. Anyway, oh my God, I just went on a tangent. But but what Kanye offered up is it appeals to people's most simplistic, I think, like people who want to just easily understand slavery, like, oh, slaves didn't rebel. Well, I'm not my ancestors. If I was back then, I would be, shut the fuck up. You wouldn't do shit. You would do the same thing that everybody else was doing, right? And not only that, what Kanye's commentary also ignores is that rebellions happen all the time. They did not write about it. You have to literally excavate history to find out about rebellion. It existed, but the larger like white forces didn't want to publicize it, right? It didn't want that to be that, and I'm going to borrow this phrase from another subject matter. They didn't want that to be a moral contagion. They didn't want black folks fighting for freedom and liberation to be popularized. They didn't want it to catch fire, right? So to speak. And so I think people like Kanye, whether they're unwell or completely healthy, or at least not suffering from mental illness, they fail to understand how rebellions popped off in this country. And there were way more rebellions than we'll ever know because a lot of things were buried in obscurity. But let me just let that rock. I just had to give a little preamble because she's clearly referencing Kanye talking about slavery being a choice. Let me see the chat before I start playing the video. D, you co-signing. That's what's up. KCJ18. You say, I hate when people start that I'm not my ancestors. It's so anti-black. It's so wrong. KCJ18, you right? Ancestors lost their lives so you could be arrogant about your existence today. Exactly. We've been divorced from, that connection to that history, that rebellious history has been severed. Great, just severed so much that we out here acting like we the reason we free. Nah. And also, rebellion took place in so many different forms. We'll get into that a little bit later.
So there's been a lot of talk about black folks and slavery lately. For the record, enslaved Africans did not choose to be shackled, torn from their families, then bought and sold in the U.S. only to be tortured by slave owners. Yeah. And some fought back. The first documented revolt was in 1663. When enslaved Africans joined forces with the white indentured servants.
Come on.
And the first documented all-black rebellion was in 1687. Here are a few other epic American slave rebellions that you should know about.
We talking about organized labor today, y'all.
At minimum, there were roughly 250 slave rebellions between 1619, when the first enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas, and 1865. First, let's chat about the New York City slave revolt.
Come on.
In 1708, there was a slave revolt in Long Island. 7 white people were killed and the insurgents were captured and executed. A few years later, in 1712, a group of over 20 armed Native Americans and enslaved Africans gathered in New York City and set fire to a slave owner's home.
Okay, I'm gonna pause right there because I remember when that cornball Tyler Bear Spray Bessinger that got dunked on by Moya. I remember when he would go on cameras and say, well, we can't celebrate Demarvisi because he was trying to kill my great ancestors. Let me tell y'all something. If y'all get tripped up over the blood that was shed, right? If y'all get tripped up over that, you are really not understanding how cruel the institution of slavery was. Like, I'm reading, they were her property. When I tell you the story I read yesterday, in some of the first chapters, that I'm getting through. When I tell you how brutal slavery was, I every day, and it's not that I relish in this fact at all, but every time I crack a new book, especially one that is written by an amazing historian, I learn something new about what it would be like a day in the life of an enslaved man, woman, child, girl, boy. Like, I learned something. I'm not even going to spoil it for you because I really want y'all to read that book. I swear to God, I'm going to be talking about it like I'm getting paid to talk about it. Because it really shows you how cruel the institution of enslavement was. And so if you're caught up about why would these indigenous folks and these black folk, why would they raise up with weapons, then I want to know if you have that same problem with drone strikes. I want to know if you have that same problem with warfare, either the warfare that we've led or that we've joined forces with. Because the only way to win, the only way to really get free when you're being enslaved, when you're being held down in bondage, when you're denied human rights, when you're denied humanity, there is no other. You can't ask for it. You can't negotiate for it. Not in some cases, some folks, there were other exceptions, but you can't ask for freedom. You can't ask for freedom. And these instances, you could not bargain. There was no political power. And so there was no other means. But a lot of people get tripped up on, bloodshed is, I get it. If you a Quaker at heart and all that, I get it. But there was no other way to get free. Now, that shit that took place January 6th, not even close to the same thing. I don't want to hear no fucking comparisons between what those yahoos did, right? Killing cops, killing people because they believe in QAnon conspiracies, because they believe a dude with a pillow got some sort of premonition from God. Like, don't even equate those two. That's a false equivalency if someone throws that shit up. Like, Bear Spray Messenger loves to throw shit up like that. Let's reject that, right? Let me see. Let me see if somebody said something about that. Jessica is on a roll. I don't know who put something in your coffee, but I love it. She's like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, operative word being trying. I don't know what you were referring to specifically. I lost my train of thought. All right, let's let it play. But I'm just saying, for those who getting hung up on the bloodshed part, tell me what you would have done. Tell me what you would have done. I just want to know, how would you get free?
A few white dudes came to extinguish the fire, but were attacked, and 9 of them were killed. Though the rebels fled, many were eventually caught and several were executed. In 1739, there was the Stono Rebellion, which started in South Carolina. This was the largest rebellion of the 13 colonies.
Come on.
Led by a man named Jemmy, about 20 slaves raided a store near the Stono River, where they killed the white store owners, leaving their decapitated heads in front of the store. Clearly, these rebels had a message to send. Eventually, the group grew to approximately 100 slave rebels, and they marched towards freedom in Florida while chanting liberty, liberty. The slaves were able to hold off the English for over a week.
They marched toward Florida because what people don't know, and I learned this over the last 2 years, the initial Underground Railroad did not go north. The first Underground Railroad went to Florida, where that wasn't that was better conditions, that had different oh my God, I'm messing it up. But Florida was a place where Black and indigenous folk held certain territories, and so freedom or a semblance of freedom could be experienced in Florida. So that's where the rebels from the Stoner Rebellion were headed to.
Before colonists finally crushed the uprising. These uprisings came with a price. Stoner reinforced the idea that slaves needed to be controlled. Slave imports from Africa were put on hold, and the Negro Act of 1740 was passed, limiting the few rights of the enslaved. For example, slaves weren't allowed to meet in groups. And lastly, one of the most well-known slave uprisings was Nat Turner's Rebellion.
Come on.
In 1831, minister and slave Nat Turner rallied 6 slaves to rebel. Armed with hatchets and knives, the group murdered Turner's masters and the master's family. In 2 days, the group attacked more than a dozen homes, killing around 55
Thank you,
white
Joni.
people. As the rebels continued to march, taking no prisoners, they continued to grow to over 70 slaves and headed towards Jerusalem, Virginia. By the end of the rebellion, about 120 slaves were executed. Turner escaped and hid out for nearly 2 months, but was eventually caught, hanged, and skinned. Because of slave rebellion, some states made it illegal for black folks to learn how to read and write. And we're only scratching the surface of how these consequences have rippled into the present day. Many of the enslaved were, dare I say, free thinkers, but those who didn't revolt weren't regarded as lesser than. They all lived and died during a time in which merely surviving was considered a miracle. And their silent struggle was the reason why many of us are alive today.
What's up? I'm PJ with The Root.
Okay, we're going. I thought that was very important, right? And see, you can see the thumbnail here, and featuring, Mr. West. It's just amazing. Like I'm telling you, manic moments. I've been in some spirals that I'm not proud of. That I would rather choose to forget. But honestly, ain't nothing compared to what Kanye, and I really feel for the brother because he is just not well. All right, again, not sure how I feel about this content, but I think that the subject matter is covered competently. I think it's positioned in a way that I think you'll get a lot out of it. So this is, again, I want to get into the Stoner Rebellion, and then we're going to continue our conversation around other, I guess, more traditional types of organized labor movements, like dealing with the Charleston Five, dealing with the MUSC hospital workers strike. This is the spicy, extra blackened and extra spicy, like Cajun style, right? Like hot chicken, like Nashville hot chicken meets the Cajun blackened something. I know y'all don't want to hear me talk about food. Here we go. All right, let me rewind it. I gotta stop autoplay. I gotta start doing this better. All right, here we go. This is from the channel Crash Course Black American History.
Hi, I'm Clint Smith, and this is Crash Course Black American History. As we mentioned before, enslaved people resisted their condition in a range of different ways.
Always.
Oftentimes, those ways were small and personal.
I don't like this.
Slowing down the pace of work, pretending to be sick.
Yep.
Purposefully misplacing your tools. Things that might slow down the efficiency of the system and give back to the enslaved some small sense of agency.
And breaking tools.
There were also times when that resistance took on larger, more dramatic forms, like with slave uprisings and rebellions. We should note that notions of what constitute as a successful versus an unsuccessful rebellion are often subjective, unhelpful, gendered, and can really obfuscate the significance of the fact that such a rebellion took place at all. Still.
Exactly, Jessica. I don't like that, like, animation. I don't like that. I cringe at that. Like, I don't like it. Right?
Some of these
Oh, you like the deep cuts, Nicole? Thank you.
Uprisings have taken on notable historical significance. And today, we're going to talk about one of those. And that's the Stoner Rebellion.
There you go, Joni. See, I don't like it. just don't sit right with my soul.
Large plantations where black people outnumbered the white people who enslaved them were not at all uncommon to slavery in the Americas. This was especially true in South Carolina, where the colony was built on the demands of cash crop production. Raising cash crops like tobacco and rice gave rise to plantations that were designed to grow as much of that valuable crop as possible.
Indigo.
And what those plantations needed, more than anything, was labor. The heavy reliance on slavery in the Southern colonial economy resulted in a vast expansion of the practice. In South Carolina, the high demand for enslaved labor led to a black majority in the colony. And by the year 1740, slavery in the colonies was no longer characterized only by African captives, but had grown to include black people who were born on American soil. The population of black people in South Carolina had risen to approximately 40,000, compared to 20,000 white people.
They were shook.
Making black people about 2/3 of the colony's entire population. Moreover, ships were...
Ain't that crazy how that's the complete opposite now? And that didn't happen that's not coincidence, that wasn't accidental. There's a reason why the population shifts so much, right? I wonder what it was.
still bringing large numbers of African captives into South Carolina, adding to the growing enslaved population there. And as the demographics of the colony continued to change, white planters began to worry about being so outnumbered and about the potential of violent resistance. But instead of, deciding that slavery was an unethical and morally unsustainable enterprise,
as it was,
they just decided to fight potential fire with fire. In response to the growing numbers of enslaved black people in the colony, in August of 1739, South Carolina passed the Security Act, requiring all white men to carry firearms to church each Sunday.
Makes you think about the whole Dylan Roof thing a little differently, and I'm being serious. Not only that, so they were fearful as those populations grew. I don't know the timeline, so I don't want to misspeak completely, but I do know that there was certain stops, at least in Charleston, they put a stop to the importing. I'm using language that I don't, that just for the sake of just discussing it, but that's not how I would call it, right? It's a forced migration. Let's just say it. It's a forced migration. So they put a stop to the forced migration of black bodies from the continent of Africa at some point, even though we know there was a black market where they were still sneaking in slaves, in South Carolina. But there was a point where I believe the ceasing is a cessation, the stop, I guess the temporary halting of bringing in black bodies for the express purpose of exploited labor and sex trafficking. There's a reason. I think that reason for stopping it at certain points was because the population was disproportionately, or was overwhelmingly, let me use that word, overwhelmingly black. And so that stoked a lot of fears in people, white people. And so they started to pregame. And that's how, this is the thing for Tyler Bessinger, rebellion's bad. White people knew slavery was bad. If you're fearing rebellion, why are you fearing rebellion? You treat your slaves right? You don't hit them. The stuff they taught me in high school here, when Mr. Barnwell taught me that slaves were content, right? Slaves were treated well because they were property, right? Slaves were fed and had health care. If all that shit was true, why y'all scared? Why y'all carrying guns to church? Why y'all creating citadels and whatnot to put down slave insurrection? Why y'all pre-gaming? If slavery was such a great thing and my ancestors benefited from it, why are y'all trying to be preemptive in terms of putting down rebellion before rebellion even pops off? One would think, because you knew it was fucked up, right? Let me rewind that part right here. Let me rewind that a little bit. Rewind it just a little bit.
To change, white planters began to worry about being so outnumbered.
Come on.
And about the potential of violent resistance.
Yep.
But instead of, deciding that slavery was an unethical and morally unsustainable enterprise, they just decided to fight potential fire with fire.
Mm-hmm.
In response to the growing numbers of enslaved black people in the colony, in August of 1739, South Carolina passed the Security Act, requiring all white men to carry firearms to church each Sunday. Before this act, it wasn't customary for white men in South Carolina to take their weapons to church. And also on Sundays, black people regularly worked unsupervised. But these planters wanted to be ready at a moment's notice, anywhere they went, to protect themselves from the enslaved people who they were worried might turn on
Think
them.
about how that
But notably, this act was passed before the Stono Rebellion took place, and it wouldn't go into effect for another few weeks.
Come on.
The Stono Rebellion took place in that interim period. Also heightening the generalized sense of white fear in South Carolina was the Spanish threat brewing in nearby Spanish-controlled Florida.
Spanish-controlled Florida.
And although they also practiced slavery, the Spanish were intent on disrupting colonial life in the English territory. So, the Spanish further disrupted the racial dynamics in the English colony by issuing a proclamation that, with only a few stipulations, including converting to Catholicism, Spain would grant freedom to any black person who could make it to St. Augustine, Florida.
Damn.
Many captives coming to Charlestown, which is present-day Charleston, came from areas in West Central Africa where the Portuguese had spread their language and religious beliefs. And many of them would have been aware of the 1733 offer.
Mm-hmm.
A growing black population, including some African natives not yet fully accustomed to plantation culture, in combination with the Spanish offer, created the perfect storm for the Stono Rebellion to take place. This insurrection would become the largest the colony would ever face, and one of the bloodiest in the United States history.
Talk about it.
Let's go to the thought bubble. The Stono Rebellion,
Oh, boy.
which erupted on Sunday, September 9th, 1739,
Shout out Jimmy.
was led by an enslaved man named Jemmy. Jemmy, and those who fought alongside him, chose Sunday to revolt because They believed that it presented the best conditions to actually pull this thing off, given that all of the planters and their families were at church, and the enslaved were working largely unsupervised. We don't know too much about Jemmy. Historical records suggest that he was from what is now Angola.
Oh, yeah.
And many enslaved Africans who came to Carolina from
Angola
were in fact trained soldiers who had fought in the region's civil war
and
who had experience with guns. And Jemmy may have been able to read Portuguese and Spanish, which increases the likelihood that he would have heard of the 1733 Spanish Proclamation. Starting with just 20 enslaved people, Jemmy and the group acquired guns and ammunition by raiding a warehouse and marched up the Stono River banks carrying banners that plainly read, "Liberty." As they marched south, others, seeing what was happening, dropped their tools and joined the group. By nightfall, the crowd swelled to nearly 100 black people willing to risk it all for their freedom. The rebels hoped to make their way to St. Augustine to gain their freedom, but just 10 miles later, when they reached the Edisto River, white colonists overtook them, killing an estimated 30 rebels. While some initially escaped, many were ultimately captured and executed. Others were sold and shipped off to the Caribbean.
Ooh.
As for Jemmy, historians aren't really sure what happened to him. He's lost to the missing pages of history.
Intentionally.
Thanks, Thought Bubble. These attacks weren't haphazard or indiscriminate.
Nope.
Many of the rebels had specific ideas of who they wanted to attack and who they didn't.
There you go, D.
As a result, some white people were spared along the way. A local tavern owner, for example, known to be relatively kind to his laborers, was intentionally left alone. Some of the enslaved even protected their enslavers from the violence. One group shielded a Quaker man named Thomas Eliot by hiding him from the rebels as they approached. The Stono Rebellion was a moment of clarity for South Carolina authorities, and they wanted to make sure that something like this would never happen again. But again, it's telling that they did not come to the conclusion that maybe slavery and the idea of holding large groups of people in intergenerational chattel bondage was actually the real problem. Instead, they blamed the enslaved and they blamed the Spanish. The South Carolina government claimed that the Negroes would not have made this insurrection had they not depended on St. Augustine for a place of reception afterwards. Following the rebellion, South Carolina's House of Assembly passed a law called an act for the better ordering and governing of Negroes.
See, this is also like this is kind of a jump a little bit, but this is like the type of rationale I think goes into people who put a premium on civility whenever folks are trying to fight for their liberation, fight for their freedom, fight against oppression. A lot of people put emphasis on civility. They didn't like how the disruption popped off, and so they're so transfixed and so like just stuck on the violence that takes place in terms of like these people's fight that they lose. They don't even consider, I won't even say lose, because lose would essentially mean that they've actually made contact with why people rebelled, but they don't even consider the why. They don't examine the why. And I would venture to say that this is the type of rationale that goes into a lot of neoliberal, liberal, white-led spaces here in Charleston and throughout. This is what white moderates kind of like, they make that pivot. Like, okay, the civility is a premium, because they really, really, really are uncomfortable with disruption. And they're really uncomfortable with taking the time to unpack why things occurred and actually attacking it at the root. Like he kept saying, like at least 3 times in this little piece, that instead of eradicating the system that creates the need for rebellion, you rather just keep continually come up with more laws and legislation that further subjugate these people, right? D, you put in the chat just now, like punishing kids for bad behavior in school instead of looking at why the kids are acting out. Right, exactly that, right? And then Jessica, you asked a question. Let me see. How are black people so unbelievably kind? I'm telling you, in the middle of that, that's an act of survival. Like I contended with that when I moved to Charleston. Not to say that Charleston, that black folk here are more kind than any other region. I just think there is a level of grace that black people, is a culture of grace here that black people practice. That I have never seen anywhere else. And I used to look at that and be frustrated. Now I get it. It's both an act of survival And it's like, yo, we've been fighting. Like they keep putting down our rebellion. I get it now. The way this state has historically put down rebellion, the viciousness and how they put down rebellion of all kind. I'm talking about MUSC workers strike as well, right? The way they put down rebellion, it really does take a toll on you after generations and generations of, like, you know, we take 2 steps forward, but then you push us back 10 steps with side dooring us, like bringing down a Confederate flag, but then, you know, signing the Heritage Act into law, right? They backdoor us in these ways that are so violent, putting down a Denmark Vesey rebellion, building the Citadel, right? And then also, like, all blacks, even those free blacks of Charleston then had to have a custodian, had to have a white custodian, so to speak, or white trustee oversee their finances and their business dealings. It's the way they backdoor us. Every time we make a step forward. I get why black people practice this culture of grace, is what I'm calling it. It's something I kind of came up with. But it's like a culture of grace that's practiced here. I've never seen it anywhere else. It's so real here, and it can be frustrating if you've lived other places. But that's not to say that that practice of grace is not to say that that's a bad thing. I had to learn that that's an act of survival. Like, how do you survive here? How do you survive here economically if you're black, if you don't, in some way, shape, or form, practice grace? There's really no way to survive it here.
And other slaves in this province. And if this sounds like the slave codes we mentioned previously,
oh boy,
you're right.
More weebles.
The legislation enacted by the South Carolina House of Assembly became another legal avenue to block Africans from obtaining any rights or liberties. Among the new statutes and limitations was a policy that made it illegal for enslaved people to learn how to read and write. Throughout the era of slavery, planters wanted to prevent enslaved people from learning to read and write.
That's violence.
For a range of different reasons.
It's representational violence.
Jemmy and his compatriots' proud display of their Liberty Banner, as well as their knowledge of the Spanish policy, proved that there were dangerous consequences for white planters who allowed their laborers to become literate.
There you go.
This idea would remain relevant more than 100 years later. In his 1845 memoir, Frederick Douglass, the formerly enslaved writer, orator, and abolitionist, quoted his own enslaver on the subject of literacy and enslaved people. If you teach him how to read, there will be no keeping him. It would forever unfit him to be a slave. He would at once become unmanageable and of no value to his master. This was an existential fear for the planters, who feared that literacy would allow enslaved people to recognize words, written clues, and directions that could help them develop plans to escape. They even worried that the enslaved might forge freedom papers, which were official documents that free black people needed to prove their free status, as they could be stopped and questioned by suspecting whites at any time. White enslavers also enforced illiteracy to ensure that enslaved people couldn't form their own interpretations of biblical texts.
Wow.
Because many whites used the idea of evangelism and bringing Christianity to enslaved people as justification for their enslavement. Many laborers were required to attend church services and listen to sermons that interpreted scripture to mean that God intended for Africans to be enslaved to Europeans, and that obedience to one's enslaver was necessary for them to get into heaven. So the thinking was, if enslaved people learned how to read and write, they might come to understand that these preachings that they had heard from their enslavers were actually being manipulated to serve their own ideological ends. And to put the cherry on top, schools were established in South Carolina to indoctrinate enslaved people with this ideologically infused interpretation of Christianity.
Shit.
These schools taught black people to believe that the institution of slavery was ordained by God and should not be challenged. This message was disseminated in hopes of discouraging any further violent rebellion. Authorities in South Carolina also created new policies that they hoped might shift the demographics of the state. According to historian Peter Wood, after the Stono Rebellion, slave importations were cut by nearly 90% during the 1740s.
There we go.
And policies were put in place to encourage immigration from Europe, with the goal of increasing the white population in the colony. There were also some half-hearted attempts to improve, if you can even call it that, the treatment of enslaved people. Planters could be penalized for especially cruel punishment and for imposing excessive work.
I read about that
hoped
yesterday.
that the improved conditions might reduce the chances of another rebellion. But the phrases cruel punishment and excessive work should be understood in context. Treating enslaved people with less cruelty, but continuing to keep them enslaved, isn't really an act of benevolence.
I see you, KCJ.
Therefore, we should be careful to note that these stipulations did not make slavery more humane in South Carolina. Slavery is still slavery.
Diet
the
slavery
record of the
is
Stono
still
Rebellion
slavery.
highlights the courage and bravery of enslaved Black people who are willing to go to extreme lengths to gain their freedom. And I guess when you put it that way, it's not so different from the stories we've long been told of Americans who are willing to sacrifice their lives for the prospect of liberty. Those who led and participated in the Stono Rebellion were not the first to rebel violently against slavery in the colonies, and would certainly not be the last.
Joni, you're
and
right.
remember, trying to determine whether a rebellion was successful or not kind of misses the point.
Yeah.
The Stono Rebellion isn't important because of its relative success or failure. It's important because it is emblematic of a resistance that will echo throughout the history of slavery. I hope you'll keep this in mind as we continue to celebrate the myriad.
And I'm gonna stop right there, Joni. You dropping bars right there. You dropping bars, right? Like, but the gag is a lot of them mofos couldn't read either. I just read that in They Were Her Property. There was a quick piece about that, about illiteracy, especially I think among women, the women who were slave owners or what have you. There was just a certain little blurb about that, which it kind of disrupts and messes with what we were taught, right? But the gag is that a lot of them were illiterate as well. But just creating all these different barriers to freedom, all these barriers toward like enjoying certain aspects of humanity. I really thought this was helpful, especially I love his narration. Clint Smith, I think I first became acquainted with, hold on a second, something popping up over here. Allow. Okay. Always. Okay. Sorry. A little thing popped up over here. I like Clint Smith. I first became familiar with his voice and his, I guess his historical teachings and whatnot on the Pod Save Bros that I don't enjoy anymore. They had the podcast, I can't remember the name, I'm not being silly, with DeRay McKesson and all them. And I've stopped listening to that years ago for so many different reasons. I don't think we should throw away our Black people, but just found that content to be a little problematic. But anyway, Clint Smith was on that podcast, that initial Black podcast led by DeRay McKesson, and Sam Sinagwe was on there, and so on and so forth. So I really do like Clint Smith's work. I don't like the animation, to KCJ's point. Like, there's so many other types of things you could have employed there. Graphics, taking old documents. You could have just recreated some things to make it. The whole Weeble thing to me is off-putting, and again, it gives that whole like, hey, come and learn about this, and once you watch this, then you're cool. Now you understand. I really do. It kind of gives off that memification vibe. Yeah. Again, for those who just joining me, hey, it's Labor Day. We're talking about all types of labor. Typically, for those who just joining me or what have you, typically I talk about Black-led organized labor movements and the workforce, but I thought it was appropriate my first Labor Day on Twitch to discuss at length exploited labor forces and their rebellion, and viewing their rebellion as actually the first, viewing rebellion like the Stoner Rebellion as first iterations of organized labor movement work. I don't know if that's really problematic in framing it that way, but I think it is helpful because not only were Black people, Black and Indigenous people fighting for a recognition of their humanity, they also were rebelling against the conditions that they had to endure. Because specifically talking about Black people, we were brought here for the express purpose of just to be exploited for our labor, exploited for sex trafficking, to be exploited for a number of other things. But we were not brought here to be people. And so I thought it was helpful and informative to bring that up as well. D, you said that the animation feels like it infantilizes the topic. It does, and I'm sure they probably getting this feedback because it's all in. You can see the two thumbnails if you can. I know it's not that large, but like the Phyllis Wheatley, like it just looks Yeah, that's not my favorite thing. And like and if you just listen to it without seeing it, it sounds so like robust and like authority, like he has a voice, a deep baritone, right? All right. Again, I want to also visit what I view as this type of cultural labor, this cultural output that isn't really recognized as labor. I think it's important I have this really complicated view on sweetgrass basket making and the culture around how Black folks are choosing to commodify. I don't have a problem with Black people selling sweetgrass baskets. I want to say that 100%. Unequivocally, nah, I don't have a problem with Black folks, Gullah Geechee folks, selling baskets. I do, however, have a problem with, I don't want to say a problem, I really like to see more or hear more, and maybe I just haven't heard it. I don't want to completely ignore or erase anyone's fight to modernize the selling of these wares, but to me, what I think we could do a better job of, if I can say this without overstepping my boundaries, as a Kumya Binya hybrid who don't know how to weave a basket. But I really do hope that we start positioning these baskets or considering them as the rare, as the amazingly, like it's you have to be a gifted person to create these wares. You have to be a special person. You have to come from a certain lineage. The true artisans who create these sweetgrass baskets and other things related to sweetgrass basket weaving, these people have been taught this for generations. And it is, in some instances, you can argue this is a dying art form. And knowing that this is something that younger people, and I'm going to consider myself a younger person in this context, young people like me really are not interested in learning how to do this craft, right? People like me just aren't picking it up the way perhaps we once did, out of necessity even. That to me demonstrates or shows, or illustrates how important it is to keep this art form alive, yes, and also the scarcity is about to be real. And scarcity doesn't just scarcity is not the only earmark of something being of value. I get that, right? I think it's what we pour into it. I think the evolution of the sweetgrass basket to me is important to lift up. The evolution that it emerged from necessity, and then it emerged. Matter of fact, let me stop talking. Let me just drop some bars. Come on, Numlock. Let me stop talking. And I've shared this on Instagram many a time. This is from bars. I'm gonna get back to him too. Again, we're talking about Labor Day in a very different way than I typically have. We're gonna talk about the other, the greatest hits, but we gotta talk about labor from I believe from these different perspectives. So this is from when the 1619 Project initially launched. They had this huge program in person in New York City. And it was this huge, I guess, over 2 hours of like the people who contributed to the 1619 Project kind of added context and explained their work. You had some amazing voices, of course, Nicole Hannah-Jones and Eve Ewing are just two names that just jump out at me. Jamel Bowie, another one. But this presentation here, to me, is just so important because it talks about, I'm gonna let it rock. We're gonna talk about the cobblestones on the street, and we're gonna talk about that low country basket, and then we're gonna transition from the low country basket explanation into, again, how I'm connecting this to labor today, Black labor, Black people's contributions to labor here in the low country.
Exhibit at the museum.
So
let me get to it. I gotta let y'all hear the ballaststone thing again. I gotta let y'all hear it.
Ballaststone.
The ballaststone. So we have a program called the Slave Rex Project. We go around and we look at slave shipwrecks around the world.
Yo, one day we're going to do a whole live stream on a slave wreck in this area. We're going to do a whole live stream on it because that ship, Lord have mercy.
We tried to identify them, authenticate them, and raise artifacts from the ocean floor. The ballast stone is from the São José, a slave ship that left Lisbon, went to...
KCJ 18, where are you from? Where are you from, yo? KCJ 18, the questions, the commentary. Yes, Sweetgrass is difficult. Yes, we're going to get into that too. That also, the raw materials, because of climate change. See how oppression is linked, y'all? Can my people, can my Gullah Geechee people, my extended Gullah Geechee community, other Gullah Geechee descendants who practice this art craft, can they even practice it anymore because the scarcity of the raw materials that they would use? And why is it scarce? Is it just climate change? Is it a bunch of other things? It's a bunch of other things, yo. KCJ 18. Got you. You just reminded me of a podcast interview that I did with Jennifer Singleton. Shout out Jennifer Singleton. Shout out Akua from Geechee Experience for putting me on to Jennifer. Jennifer broke it down for me. I'm going to point y'all in a direction. We're not going to be able to listen to it, but I'm going to point you in the direction if you want to listen to it. The Policy Link podcast that I did, the first episode starts in the Low Country, and I interviewed Jennifer Singleton, who is a master basket weaver. I believe she works on the Boone Hall plantation in terms of, I believe she provides some sort of education programming, or she teaches or educational instruction around sweetgrass basket weaving. And the history behind it. She is a force to be reckoned with. For real. It's scarce as hell. Thank you for lifting that up in the chat. Sorry for pausing this, but let's get to the ballast stone. The ballast stone. What is a ballast stone? Tamika, what is a ballast stone?
Mozambique picked up captive Africans, was on its way to Brazil to sell them into slavery. In Brazil, it crashed off the coast of South Africa. There were 512 enslaved Africans on board. 212 perished. The others were saved. Why? Because they were property and therefore profit. They were sold into slavery. But the ballast stone, what's important about that is it was the marker that helped us identify the ship. Because ballast stones offset the human weight so the ships wouldn't turn over. Through doing archival research and maritime archaeology, we were able to identify this ship because the records show that there were 1,400 ballast stones aboard this ship. And when you think about it, think about how we read our landscape.
Come on.
Ballast stones cover the streets in Charleston, South Carolina.
Come on.
They come in different forms. In St. Croix, the ballast stones cover all of that landscape in the form of yellow bricks. So this is history in plain sight. You can't mitigate slavery. There's no such thing as a little bit of slavery.
Come on.
And then the last image we're going to talk about is the Low Country basket.
Here we go.
First, tell me why this was important for you to include, and then tell us why it matters.
The Low Country basket, like the other artifacts, open up a conversation about many different things. One thing that is extremely important is people say, well, they came with nothing.
Come on.
Really?
Unskilled.
We came with empty hands, but we did not come with empty heads.
Well,
we have memories of our grandmothers, our foodways, the way we dressed ourselves, our governmental organizations, our military power,
right,
our intellect. And so people came with empty hands, but their intellect helped create an economic system that made this nation a powerhouse. When we went to visit the rice fields in Charleston, and we went to a place called Caw, the gentleman there who oversees that historic site said that a group of German engineers, hydraulic engineers, said there's no way anyone could recreate the landscape that these intellectual people of African descent created. That profitable landscape.
Rice plantation.
And also the fact that this coil basket reminds you of the coil designs of the fanner baskets.
Come on.
Here you have this object that was used practically to separate the rice.
Yep.
But then also women putting their children in the baskets as they were doing the work that they were forced to perform
So that's why I thought it was important to show this clip again. Thank you, Justin, for acknowledging. I keep sharing it because, you never know who else might catch it and file it away. And I hope that any content I share, that it sparks, like, it starts off like, it helps if you're curious like me, a naturally curious person that always asks why, and either in your head or audibly, questioning authority and questioning systems. I really do hope that people take some of the content that I share and start their own research about it. And so why I thought this was important and appropriate to share is, again, we're linking Labor Day. I know traditionally we want to lift up, and as we should, lift up that labor movement that we already referenced with the History Channel video, these largely white-led organized movements that did give us things like the 8-hour workday or, the 5-day work week, whatever, right? But we also got to take it a little step back and take quite a few steps back and talk about how folks have always resisted, the exploitation of their labor. And not only that, when I think about labor, I think about what folks use, the tools they use, the Low Country basket, how we sell it now as a part of the local charm and history in the Gullah Geechee culture, but its actual use initially was for practical uses to help with the whole cultivation of rice, to also, as we just heard, where new mothers would place their infant children in these baskets as they were forced to continue working. They didn't have no maternity leave back then. That, especially if you weren't even considered human. I can only imagine how fast these new mothers had to return to the fields. I can only imagine, like, I've said this a lot. I hope it doesn't sound, I hope I'm not offending anybody. I hope I'm not like sounding like I'm being hyperbolic, but we really don't have the slightest clue how heinous the institution of slavery was. We really have no clue. Like, I think I say that because every day I find out something new and more horrific. And then even when talking about the beauty and the brilliance that went into this basket, it reminds me that, damn, these women had to put their babies in a basket and keep working. It's just like, I couldn't imagine. Let me get to the chat over here on Twitch. Yo, Jessica, why are you saying that you can't be blowing up the spot? One thing Jenna Faye taught me, let me get to that real quick, and then I'm gonna hop back into the Sweetgrass baskets and tie it to black labor contributions, all of that. But let me see if I can find it. Water pot. Ooh. You would think I'd have it like bookmarked. So if you guys go to policylink.org, go to PolicyLink. It's the Water Equity podcast series, right? And so they came up with their own. Okay. I had my own cover art, but that's cool. Is this the microsite they promised? So if you go to the first episode, they renamed everything. That's cool. You go to the first episode, Sweetgrass artisan Jenna Faye Singleton shares her love for basket weaving and how climate change is impacting her work, right? And then I talked to my friend Brian Walter as he joins to explore the disproportionate impacts of climate change on BIPOC communities, and especially BIPOC communities in terms of how they make these artisan wares. So if you go to PolicyLink and try to find the Water Equity podcast series that I produced, I owe them like 2-3 more episodes. I hope they're not tripping. But it's great to see the podcast like this. Oh, this is great. I haven't even seen this. Hold on, let me play a little bit. Hold on.
Welcome to the Water Equity Podcast, produced in partnership with the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus. I'm your host, Mika Gadsden, and
I'm acting like I never heard
this. This is an environmental justice podcast series, and in this space, I'll be exploring the ways in which water inequities
Somebody give that girl a radio show.
Opportunities, mobility, and cultural identity of marginalized communities. Each conversation will amplify important messages from Black, Indigenous, and people of color and center their perspectives from the front lines. I'll also be inviting a range of artists onto the show
I love
to
this voice
gain
too,
their
B.
perspectives into how art, be it musical, visual, or literary, can be used to elevate these issues, helping to demand water equity and justice. And there's one artist in particular who you'll be hearing from
That's
in
my editing.
each episode, and that is Benny Starr.
All right.
Benny's powerful A Water album serves to share more information about this podcast.
Hold on. That's my homie
Thanks,
Axel.
Axel.
Okay.
Without further ado,
Let me just listen a little bit more.
Episode 1. Location, the South Carolina Lowcountry. Title, Rising Water, Development, and Dispossession.
I called it that. Then they call it The Water Keeps Rising on Us, which is appropriate. They did a good job. But here, like I'm gonna invite y'all to go listen to the podcast series, listen to this first episode, and to KCJ's point earlier in the chat. Yes, sweetgrass, the raw materials used to make these baskets are contributing to the scarcity of this art form, and therefore, to me, the value. I'm telling y'all, if y'all got aunties who have like authentic baskets, like you better put them somewhere. I don't know what type of storage you need for such wares. I don't know if you could treat it, dip it in something, some kind of resin. I don't know, but make sure you preserve what you have, because between white supremacy, between capitalism, and climate change. You know what I mean? This is becoming a very rare art form. And Jenna Faye, let me tell you something. Let me just take you behind the scenes real quick. Jenna Faye, I reached out to her again. Shout out Akua from Geechee Experience for connecting me. I reached out to her and I'm like, yo, can I pay you for an interview to talk about your art form? I really want to talk to you, want to interview you. So I tried to give her a Zencaster link. Didn't work, wasn't working. You know, internet, y'all know, Wi-Fi and broadband is just a damn shame. She literally drove down to, like, I think the dollar store in her area and called me on the phone, and we just made it work. And it was, I mean, we tried for a good little bit, and we finally got a good interview, and the audio's a little, like, you'll hear it. She's clearly on the phone. But she talks about in great detail, and she doesn't want to give up her hotspot like Jessica just did. She don't want to give up her hotspot because there's a certain fiber, and she makes a distinction between the fibers that are traditionally used and those that some other people use, because of the scarcity. She talks about that at length. So go to episode 1 and listen to that. You won't be disappointed. I think I did a great job. And if those who like, oh, Tamika, you let it trail off, you cut her off. I did it at the right spot. You ain't missing nothing. I got a lot of feedback on that. Like, oh, why'd you let it trail off? That's my style. I like doing that. I like fading off so you think that it's still, the conversation is still going. Like, again, trying to encourage curiosity. All right. Thank you for the feedback on my voice. I like that. I can listen to myself on this podcast. I cannot listen to myself in 2018 and 2019 trying to be freaking Terry Gross or somebody. Ugh. Shout out Policy Link. But yeah, so Low Country Baskets, Labor Day, Black Labor, Black Labor's contributions to the tourism landscape and to the landscape in general here in Charleston is important. Now I want to go back to a story from, I think, a few years ago, about the sweetgrass baskets from CBS Sunday Morning. You could tell I'm a Vieja at heart. I swear. All right. Because I love me some CBS. Because they let it play.
Outside Charleston, South Carolina, Highway 17 looks like another southern country road.
Mixed feelings.
It's actually a working art gallery of sweetgrass baskets.
All of the basket makers are artists.
Again, there's a beauty and there's a purpose in them being outside and practicing this art. But I do think that largely sweetgrass basket weaving, and the way that the tourism culture here and the tourism industries have positioned this art form is largely out in the oppressive heat and humidity. And perhaps, and I've never polled or spoken directly to a sweetgrass basket weaver who performs this art outside, but I do feel like there's a part of the roadside vendor, and I don't want to like again, I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't sell their wares along the roadside, because I think that this has over time, over generations, become an expectation from our tourists here. Like they're told to go to the roadside to pick up these wares, and while I think some of that is okay, I think it further marginalizes this art form, and also like you wouldn't see a Picasso out in the oppressive heat and humidity. You feel me? And I honestly, and I'm not even being, I view these as unique, one of a kind masterpieces that should be treated just like people treat like all those types of like, remember back in the day, like, I don't know, this is back in the day. I just remember in the 80s and 90s, people talking about Fabergé eggs or certain little crystal like curios or what have you, like little things that were seen as like little collectibles that had high value in maybe largely white upper middle class homes. I feel like these baskets are the exact same thing. And I think that these are things that we need to treat with more respect and reverence, and it shouldn't just be relegated to the side of the road, right? I think that with these like wooden shacks, this is where I get kind of like a little like I get it, it serves a purpose, but at what point do we push for this type of artistry to be treated like a Picasso, like a Basquiat, like a Warhol? That's my argument. I don't know. It does, to me, feels diminishing, to use your word, right? D?
No matter how they work on their basket, they all are considered artists.
Henrietta Snipe, now 63, has woven baskets since she was 7. It's more than a family tradition.
This was a way of putting food on the table.
Still is a way.
Still is a way.
Because some people never did anything else but basket.
That's why we're talking about it today.
They never did anything else but just
on
do
Labor
baskets.
Day.
And this was a survival.
What does it represent to you?
I tell people when I do this basket, it reflects my entire community. I never look at the basket and say, this is what I do, this is what my family do.
Go ahead.
I represent a community.
Thank you, Miss Snipe.
That community is the Gullah, descendants of West African slaves first brought to coastal South Carolina and Georgia in the early 1700s. They wove baskets from native grasses and plants out of necessity. Before these baskets became art, they were tools.
That's right.
Charleston was a place that grew a lot of rice. This particular design was used on the plantation. When the slaves would go out and gather the rice,
look at that.
They would put it in this particular style basket. And they put all of the rice after they gather it, put it in here, and then they would throw it up in the air, and you feel the breeze.
The grasses for the baskets grow wild. Lynette Hewson took us to one field.
We're standing in sweetgrass?
We are standing right in the middle of sweetgrass. Sweetgrass is this green item here. What we do, we take a handful, put our foot on the root, hopefully, and we pull it out of the
you gonna go get some?
And it's just that easy.
Her granddaughter Elise tagged along.
And what will you do with this?
I will lay it out in the sun, go spread it out in the sun for about 3 to 5 days. Hopefully it dries. When it dries, it shrinks.
I also want to talk about in that episode from the Policy Link podcast, I talk with Jennifer, and then I talk with Brian Walter, my friend and comrade. And Brian talks about scarcity also not only just being contributed to climate change, but I think to Jessica's point, a lot of these raw materials are now behind gated communities, right? So like gentrification is also complex. See how all oppression is linked, y'all? I'm telling you. So like gentrification and all these community developments that have popped up in these once rural places have now placed the raw materials for sweetgrass basket weaving behind some sort of barrier. And so folks like Jessica do need to volunteer. Like if they got a little ducky spot, you know what I mean? Off the radar, off the beaten path. Gotta keep it on the low though, Jessica. Cause when you listen to Jennifer, she'll tell you, like, I ain't telling you my spot. I got a spot. and I think there's a lot of late night sneakery going on too to get these raw materials. But yeah, gentrification, climate change, the art form not being passed down because of disinterest. All of that plays into why this is going to become, like, I would say in the next decade, we're going to see a real, like, there needs to be a real push to make this like, yo, you got these? Because, you know what I mean? These ain't, they're not making more sweet. We killing the marsh area. We're killing all the green spaces. There ain't going to be too much of this raw material. And then some people to Jennifer has left the area. She has gotten in her car. So I'm only imagining that other sweetgrass basket weavers have done the same thing. They've gotten in their car and gone to other states where they know this grass grows. That's crazy. And so when you factor that into the labor, come on, y'all. When you factor that into what goes in the basket, whatever they charging, however many thousands or hundreds of dollars they charging, double it. They need to double it. I'm dead ass serious. It needs to be cost prohibitive. It needs to be cost prohibitive to own one of these baskets. And not because I'm trying to like fuel capitalism, but because the worth is what it is. A lot, the sweat equity, the scarcity, the hunting out and finding the raw materials, man, triple the price.
Drinks. And it'll be
the
a
history.
Beige tone.
Free materials, but a lot of labor.
Okay.
You start with the bottom.
I see you, Jessica.
With the pine needles to the bottom. You tie a knot, and then you work around that knot. It's like crocheting. I can do a basket like this, maybe roughly in about 10 hours.
D.
And that would sell for today?
Today, this might go for like about $350, $375, which is not too bad.
Simple baskets can sell for $40. Elaborate pieces, often prized by collectors, can go for $8,000.
As they should.
You don't want her to hate the art, you know? So when she want to get up and play, she can play, but she always come back to do more.
Come on.
6 days a week, Lynette Hewson makes baskets with her mother Marilyn and daughter Kimberly.
How many generations?
I'm a fourth, as far as I can count. And
I love her visor.
Lynette is a fourth.
I want that visor.
Is six, and Elise hoping to be a seventh.
Seventh. Wow. What goes through your mind when you look at them?
Honey, I look at love, heritage, you know, because when I'm weaving, it seems like I'm in my own world. I don't have a thing to worry about.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful to me. Like just the connection to the culture being so deep that it doesn't feel like a chore. Like even she's instilling that in her daughter. Like I don't want her to hate the art form, right? She doesn't want the actual weaving and learning how to weave the basket to become a punitive exercise. I think that's super. That's how people should teach kids. Like it's almost like Montessori in a lot of ways. Yeah, meditative. Yeah, she probably gets into like that flow state, that productive flow state. Yeah. All right, let me ground this conversation again, because people probably coming here for the Rosie the Riveter story. That's all well and good. We're going to get to industrialization and all that. But it's important also to acknowledge the labor that goes into our tourism. Y'all know I'm going to keep beating this tourism drum, and I'm going to continuously remind anybody who will listen that our tourism culture is steeped in Black labor. What they're selling, even the problematic shit that they're selling, that Helen Hill and the CVB, the problematic version, the antebellum, what do we call it? Big antebellum, or the antebellum industrial complex, right? The antebellum industrial complex that Helen Hill and the CVB is selling. You know, it treats slavery. It treats our history, and that includes, of course, the enslavement of Africans. It treats our history as if in a very what am I trying to say? What they're selling ignores the contributions of the enslaved Africans that they brought here against their will. What they tend to sell via our tourism bureaus and other tourism industries or entities throughout the state, Myrtle Beach, the PD, upstate, the Midlands, what they continuously sell is a whitewashed version that doesn't go deep enough into the contributions of Black people. We just heard a historian talk about how we didn't come with empty heads, how our engineering acumen built these many rice plantations. So our acumen built generations of white wealth. And so we don't tell that entire truth. And when we don't tell that entire truth, there are so many touch points of pride that a Black person like me, a Gullah Geechee descendant like me, can make contact with and feel like, because I didn't feel this overwhelming sense of pride growing up. It was quite the opposite. And I would venture to say that many other Gullah Geechee folks who who were either raised here and left, or who were born abroad, born somewhere else and came back. I wasn't born abroad. I was born in West Long Branch, New Jersey. But those who were born somewhere else and brought here or came here, you know, we don't have the same relationship. And a lot of that is because we're told in schools, don't talk Gullah Geechee, right? I know that was something I heard in high school. We're taught the code switch. We're taught to not, that basket weaving is like, almost seem like, it's not. I want to be very clear. I want y'all to hear me. It is not like panhandling, but to me, it feels like sanctioned panhandling in that the conditions and the way, where they allow the basket weavers to sell their wares. If you look at it, squint your eyes, you feel like you're back in that time period where the subjugation of Black people was pervasive. To me, I don't feel joy. This is just my personal feelings. I don't really enjoy seeing Black women, Black men of advanced age out there in the oppressive heat weaving baskets. I feel like we deserve climate control conditions. We deserve some sort of dignity. And I'm not saying those folks don't have dignity. They are dignified. They are brilliant people who are doing something I could never do. I literally could never do it. I have the clumsiest fingers. They are dignified, but to me, the way the CVB positions the vendors, I don't feel like an overwhelming sense of pride. I almost feel like, wow, you want them to perform their oppression, or you want them to perform aspects of their oppression. I'm sure they don't agree with my take on it, but that's how I internalize it as someone with my background, growing up the way I did. I don't enjoy that. I think that they should be in the actual CVB weaving this. I think you should have to pay to watch them. Be real. These are trade secrets. I think you should pay. You should pay to be able, not like animals in a zoo, but I think it should be treated as some sort of really sacrosanct. I really just think it should be treated with more reverence. I don't know. Let me see what y'all saying. After AIC. All right, that's it. That again, and there's so much labor that goes into making this basket, and I really think that the basket weavers should be put on like the highest pedestal. Whatever pedestal they love putting Calhoun and Wade Hampton and Strom on, it should be. That's what basket weavers should be put. I really believe that. I really do. I really, really do. Right. All right, they are. That's right. And Nicole, I'm gonna listen to the artist. I'm gonna listen to you, the artist. Right. Thank you for giving me feedback on my perspective. And if you guys don't agree, please push back. I understand. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm maligning it. I'm not. I just think that at some point that the basket weavers, y'all, they are literally creating art that is rare and scarce, and that takes brilliance to create, and it should be treated as such, right? Joni, you say you understand what I'm saying. You feel a certain way about seeing elders. Yeah, elders still working, and you like, and that's you heard Miss Snipes say that it's still a necessity, right? It's still a necessity. People, Jenna Faye talks about this, how she earns a living. It's through basket weaving. When you go back and listen to the podcast episode, and I just don't want us to lose sight of that. I don't want us to lose sight of that. Let me see if there was anything else. All right, let's get I guess transition into a more modern. I don't know. I've never played this, nor have I ever actually watched this video from Bounce Charleston. Shout out to Bounce Around Charleston. I've been behind the scenes. I've been on Bounce Charleston trying to promote a trip that nobody bought tickets to. I was trying to. I failed at that. I didn't plan it right. But shout out to all the people at Bounce Around Charleston. They do a great job. I feel like lifting up some lesser known Black history and Black stories. I've never watched this. I came across this morning. Watched like 2 seconds. I said, okay, we're going to play this. So now we're going to talk about, on this beautiful Labor Day, we're going to talk about the historic MUSC hospital workers strike that took place. We already watched I Am Somebody. I'll probably cue up a clip of that real quick just to familiarize y'all with that. But we're going to watch a clip that I haven't shared or discussed. Let me see what y'all saying before I hit play. D. Bartlett, you gave me a yes, 100%. Nicole, you went on to say They should have a large basket weaving center, pay them hourly to live weave, right? All right, and be able to sell their wares and do it in a way where, like, I don't know, it should feel more like, it should feel like, this gonna sound really weird. And again, my inner senior citizen is coming out. It should kind of feel like Antiques Roadshow, where they talk about, if they want to, where somebody in there educates people on why these baskets are so important, how people can go around and you could talk about the detail, you could talk about the craftsmanship, you could talk, when you watch Antiques Roadshow and they're like, as you can see, this painting has a certain signature at the bottom. This is the such and such period of this artist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they go into all that granular detail around what makes that person's antique precious or valuable. It should have that quality to it, not, zoo-like. I don't want it to become zoo-like, which I feel like the roadside shit is. I honestly, I got complicated feelings. I'm not taking away the dignity or the agency of our current basket weavers. I really hope people get that, but I really feel like it should be elevated, right? Anyway, but I think it should feel more like Antiques Roadshow, where you're pointing out the artisanship, when you're pointing out the artistry, and you also talk about people like, what's his name? Is it Antoine Green? He makes the most, I've never seen sweetgrass basket weaving like Antoine's. Like, I was trying to get him for the podcast and couldn't get him. Couldn't find his contact information. But, like, I love seeing these younger folks remix the art form as well. And maybe we'll get into it a little bit. But the labor piece is so important. Let me see what you're saying. Like a living museum, fine art type. Absolutely. They should pay them. Yeah. Like art painters. Oh, I never heard of that. PLEIN art. Oh, plein air. Yeah, I haven't heard of that before. All right, let's play this. Let's transition to the MUSC worker strike as we lift up Black labor, Black organized labor movements, Black labor contributions here in the Low Country, in the South. Let's talk about it. All right, bounce around. And this audio is playing like out of two different ears in my headphones. So if y'all hearing the audios kind of break up, it's real. I want to validate what you're hearing, but let's see if we can enjoy it.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall
I get you, Nicole. Thank you. 1969 hospital worker strike. Oh, wow. Why I wanted to play this is because I believe they added credits to this. Shout out to Talia Rivers. I think she's still over there. Shout out Raphael James. Live 5 News.
They were nurses, they went to work. And the charge nurse, and just go ahead and start with the patient. And the rule was that you don't just start with, you look at the chart and be brief before you go in. They want them to skip that, so they didn't do it. And those nurses got fired. And Ms. Moutry heard about it, she came, told me about it.
So then he called us together for a meeting, and they were able to.
Rest in peace to the icon. Rest in peace to the Miss Mary Moultrie, the leader. We're gonna see her in her younger days, and a little bit of either the archival photos or footage shown here, or if I hop over to the documentary in my own files. Y'all, rest in peace to a legend. Another statue that needs to be built. Seriously.
Get these people back together, back on their jobs. But just through those meetings, we found out that this was not an isolated case, that this kinds of stuff was going on throughout the hospital. We were making $1.30 an hour, and some people were being paid like less than that.
Wow.
We found out that there was a lot of discrimination. that employees were referred to as monkey grunts.
Wow.
And a lot of other derogative names.
And after they got those 5 nurses rehired, we decided at that point that these nurses had enough guts to stand up for themselves, but 95% of the people, our people in that hospital, didn't have that kind of guts.
Bill Saunders was the person that I contacted concerning the workers, so he was a motivating factor. He wasn't in the hospital to help bring the workers out, but once we got him out, then he was able to work with them and to keep them focused.
Some guys from the Jackson Street Panthers. I had those guys. I was working in the mattress factory then. For 20 years I was at the mattress factory. And I had some of them working with me at the mattress factory. So they were our leaders in terms of making sure folk were protected. We had they were structured in a way that even when Dr. Abernathy was going to go to jail, we would have some of them go to jail first to make sure that they had protection. When Ms. Moocher then went to jail, we made it down the Jack. Those guys were so amazing. Some would come to me on a Monday morning, Mr. Bill, you want me to go to jail today, son? Because they can go in, and the moment they go into jail, they took over. Because they've been in there so regularly, they had a position in jail.
Oh, wow.
So we were able to get protection there.
Wow.
So,
I never heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
More than once.
The marches had numerous people, the entire community. Most of the marches were 15 to 5,000 people strong.
That's right.
We reported to the Union Hall like early in the morning, 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. We did it in shifts. So we had a lot of support. We got a lot of money. Nobody lost cars or homes. Nobody got put out because they couldn't pay the rent because the union took care of all of that. And plus, they gave each employee, each striker rather, a stipend every week.
The powerful blacks, especially, didn't want anything to do with it.
Nope.
They had nothing to do with the hospital workers. And they used the excuse for a time about me that they didn't want to be a part because I was a militant and that I had said that, I wasn't nonviolent. And so they couldn't deal with anybody that was nonviolent.
Let me stop. So this is where it gets complicated. I'm talking to black people. This is a black person conversation. Whether you can type, chat, whatever or not, I know y'all can feel me. This is talking directly to you. But we know that within our history, let's use the DeMar-VC rebellion as an example. That was undermined chiefly by other blacks. And then when upon closer look as to which blacks refused to either support or be silent as DeMar-VC planned his rebellion, the ones who just wanted to actually reinforce this caste system that was created in the colonies, like the Carolina colonies, right? That caste system where mulattoes, light-skinned mulatto blacks enjoyed more privileges and more freedoms. And they were, when you go to the state room in the main branch of the Charleston Library here in Charleston, South Carolina, when you go to that state room and you find those volumes upon volumes of free blacks or free black women of Charleston, they're talking largely about the mulatto folks that enjoyed certain privileges and freedoms because of their proximity to whiteness, either in appearance or in life, in terms of circumstances, how they gained their freedom. And that class of black people wanted to separate themselves from the dark-skinned, unambiguously black Gullah Geechee folk who were either enslaved or in some sort of like bondage or type of servitude. They wanted to really reinforce those class distinctions between the two. And they did that numerous ways, but one of the biggest ways they did it was by diming out DeMar-VC. Now, the reason why I made this a blacks only conversation, this little part of it, is because it's complicated, right? Because we still deal with the ills of colorism, and it's still a dividing point in our societies, right? In our communities, rather. I kind of use societies in a real broad way, but it's still a point of division among black people, because there is a such thing as not just light skin privilege, but the privilege of those who are biracial, whose proximity whiteness, people who choose to flaunt or to really emphasize, like overemphasize, oh no, I'm half white, or I'm this close to whiteness. There's always been this type of like division between the two. And while I'm not necessarily as interested in talking about the divisions, it's important in this context because as Mr. Saunders here is talking about, that there's people who, during Jim Crow, the people who were able to make it out, they started to prioritize making money, being affable and palatable to the white oppressive class, and the descendants of the white planter class. They put a premium on that. And it's steeped in anti-blackness. It's steeped in the same anti-blackness that undermined rebellions such as the Denmark VC Rebellion, if that makes any sense. So hearing him, my dad was my mom and my dad both are anti-militant. My dad just now learned that Malcolm X was like a good guy. Like he's just now learning that through me a little bit. Because that was reinforced. Hey, if you want to be acceptable black, you need to be with the program. You need to not be disruptive. You need to not ask for your rights in the workplace. You need to not advocate for yourself as a laborer here, making markedly less than your white counterpart, right? And so there are always this class of either mulatto. I'm using that term in this context. I would never ever refer to a biracial person as mulatto in current day, but you get what I'm saying. Like either it's the mulatto class, or if it's just the affluent black middle class that started to emerge at the tail end of Jim Crow, kinda. Those people did not want to rock the boat. Chico the Man 55, good morning. Divide and conquer is the playbook. All right, that's what you say here in the chat. They'll always find someone who will sell out his or her own people. Absolutely, for the almighty dollar. And Bell Hooks talks about that too. Like once they started letting us be consumers, right? Once they started letting us into their Woolworths and to their Crest, dime stores, and once they started letting us into these spaces where they have prohibited black bodies, we've kind of started, and then once they started hiring us too to work jobs that were a little bit better than what we were doing as sharecroppers or anything else that was more readily available during Jim Crow. Once our buying power started to increase, we started to we as a black people started to equate the ability to become a consumer, right? We started to equate that with freedom, and capitalism is not freedom, but that's the game that capitalism plays on us. That's the trick it plays on us, is thinking that, if you got money to purchase, if you got purchasing power, that means that you're seen as equal. They're only letting you in because they realize, they got money to spend now. They are earning something closer to a living wage now. They've got money to spend. We might as well open up. They didn't let you they didn't let you shop there because they actually cared about black people having access to quality goods, right? And so we started to, as a people, started to conflate increased purchasing power with liberation. And that's not the math we can afford to make. Candace Owens, Omarosa, Kanye, yep. Those are just the notable ones. There's some smooth gangsters out there too, KCJ18. There's some smooth gangsters that you don't really quite know which one. Like Councilman Dudley working with West Edge. All right.
Yet they wouldn't define what nonviolent means. Because I never hit anybody, never fought anybody. No. I just said, I ain't gonna let you hit me.
That's right.
You don't got no right to beat on me. And they said I was wrong for that. And I was 40 then, I'm 80 now. I'm still not gonna let anybody hit me.
There you go. Shots fired.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
This audio is
one of the reasons that they fired those workers, they had a real strong labor lawyer, and they told them that if you fire those that are giving you the trouble, which was about 10, and then the other ones, even if they strike, the other one will come back, and then you don't have to take back.
That's what MUSC was saying.
The 10 that you didn't want. So that's what they meant. They fired, invited them to the office to talk, and fired them, said they left their position. And what we were able to do at that point is to get the call in SCLC, who was a part of the 1199 out of New York, and they came in as a package deal, and that's how it came in. But all of it hinged around Mary Moosby.
And when they got in here, we had a lot of rallies and marches, and it was just a lot of daily activities. And 1199 suggested that we bring in SCLC because they had a lot of expertise in rallies and marches and motivating the community and stuff, which they did. And we went from there. The rest of it is history.
That's right.
And it ran from April to July. And brother, that's the height of the tourist season.
There you go.
For Charleston.
Come on.
So they had curfews, and the city of Charleston was closed down for 100 days.
Sound familiar?
So it really changed the idea of some of these people, that because they was telling the hospital workers that y'all are not even important for this hospital. Y'all are non-professional workers. Y'all don't make any difference to us here. Otis Robinson was
the myth of the unskilled laborer. They will quickly put that unskilled on you when they don't want to pay you, when they don't want to give you benefits. They're quick to tell you that you unskilled. It takes skill to take care. Some of these women, I'm going to venture, without even knowing this definitively, but just knowing my black ass family, I like a lot of these women are performing the function essentially, I guess we would call like a CNA today. My mom was a CNA. And like my mom came from a long line of black women who were domestics in the homes of white people. And when I tell you the level of skill required to not just take care of white ailing folks, but to take care of a household, to keep it clean, to keep it in order, to keep foods prepared, to keep things sanitized. Real rap. This is, my mom probably gonna hate me for this. My mom was a CNA. She also did private duty, so she was able to have her own business at one point. One day, I was with her at this really, really wealthy person's house that actually became like family to me, my mom, and my twin brother. They let us come all the time. We were good kids. We weren't running around this mansion like we were crazy. We just wanted to be in front of the cable, or play with some old stuff that we found in the closet or something. Anyway, my mom left me. She had to leave for an emergency. She says, Mika, I need to leave you here. Mr. So-and-so is asleep. Just keep an eye out. Just keep an ear out. I should be back. And Mr. So-and-so woke up and was screaming for my mother. And I'm like 8 or 9, and I had to jump in and just remember all the things that my mom did, like to make this man comfortable, because he was just uncomfortable. And I remember even at my little young age, I thought about, oh my God, I don't know how to be a nurse. And then when my mom came back, thank God she came back, because I did have to tend, he was in agony, and I jumped in and I provided him with some comfort. And he was okay with me being in there too. He's fine. I think he just wanted to be comfortable. But I remember how my mom swooped in and just assumed the position, took on her duties. And I remember how much dignity and how much skill and care and compassion that she used. My mom is a very compassionate woman, right? And she used all of that to take care of this person. And I'm saying all this because I'm talking about Labor Day, yes, because I think that especially when it comes to women-dominated fields, look at how we talk about, treat, and pay teachers. Look at how we talk about and treat these frontline workers in the hospitals who are dealing with COVID that are predominantly women. Like the nursing field is still predominantly women, even though that's changing drastically. Now, the way we are quick as a country to call this labor unskilled is rooted in a way that just continues to perpetuate the practices of not paying people a wage, not just a living wage, a wage that's actually in line with the level of skill that they employ to do their jobs. And you'll hear this over and over again as you study Labor Day, you study organized labor movements. You'll hear even historians, as we already heard, refer to this workforce as unskilled, and we have to push back on that and reject that premise. They weren't unskilled, and that's the thing, when we only view credentials and going through certain levels of academia, we only value that work. No, you have to value the work of the blue collar laborer, of the working class laborer. That work is just as important as anything that like these fraudsters over in Silicon Valley, Elizabeth Holmes I'm thinking of, these fraudsters, like what makes their work more important? What makes the work at Tesla more important than the work being done by everyday hardworking laborers here in Charleston? All right, we got to change that language around how we view labor, especially labor that's either associated largely with women or non-men, and labor that's associated with Black and brown people, BIPOC people.
The Muslim guy here in Charleston at that particular time,
There
but
you
God,
go,
he
D.
was such a speaker. And he went before those people that night and said, how could anybody tell you y'all are non-professional
Yes,
workers? Y'all
Joni.
the one that with the patient 24 hours a day. You feed them, you clothe them, you make them laugh. You do everything.
Yeah.
Nobody can call you, and don't let anybody call you a non-professional. And the hospital can't function without you, because they told them that they could function without those
and they
people.
couldn't.
And Otis Robinson is another key leader. That was with Miss Moultrie and them, and they were able to make a lot of things change.
Well, Miss Mary Moultrie was definitely seen as a powerful figure.
She was, again, I keep saying, she was the catalyst, the glue that kept people together. She could emotionalize folk, and she was in the hospital. So, I mean, folk just gathered around her, and she, she made some sacrifice.
Yes, she did.
With that, because
sure.
if you're the leader of anything like that, then you're the one that catch the most hell.
Yeah.
After we went back to work, things worked kind of okay for a while, and then it started regressing.
Yeah.
Everybody got back to work and didn't want to hear anything about the union.
Yeah.
In
They're gonna do the same thing when that museum open up. Then we're like, Negroes, we gave you this museum. What more do you want? Pipe down. I'm glad that, we don't pay enough attention to what happens after this movement, because it's not all, it kind of reminds me, indulge me for a second, completely unrelated, but you get me. If you've seen the movie The Graduate, I'm not even talking about the whole, like, premise of the movie, but the end of The Graduate, when he's Dustin Hoffman's character is banging on the window, he takes the bride, they run out, and they get on the bus, and they kind of just sit there, and the movie just ends with them kind of not even looking at each other in the back of the bus. The credits roll. That's how I feel like the MUSC workers strike kind of ended, because it's like there's all this uncertainty, there's all this, like, it was like the climatic moment of the strike, of Coretta Scott, of Reverend Abernathy coming, and a whole host of others coming. Like, that was climactic, and then what happens afterwards, right? It kind of that's, I'm happy to hear. Let me rewind it a little bit. Hear Miss Moultrie kind of speak to what happened after they went back to work, because I'm sure it wasn't just heaven on earth.
She made some sacrifice with that, because if you're the leader of anything like that, then you're the one that catch the most hell.
Absolutely.
After we went back to work, things worked kind of okay for a while, and then it started regressing. Everybody got back to work and didn't want to hear anything about the union. In 1975, I was terminated.
Wow, I didn't know
that. And
that.
I looked back and I didn't see anybody with me, so I never went in for a grievance or anything. I just took it as my loss.
So this happened in 69.
I didn't feel I had the support of the workers. You know, everybody, was back, and they had bought homes and new cars and stuff, and they didn't want to hear about the union.
I don't know if anybody, and I'm 80, that has been involved in helping people in the movement that ever been successful for themselves.
I'm telling you, okay. Look, I am not glamorizing martyrdom, nor am I hope I do not want to be a martyr either, but I can so relate to being a very loud gadfly and facing so much opposition. Man, for real, D, right? And like, it's real. And we don't talk about the impacts that people like Mary Moultrie faced after this. We don't study it enough. And I will say, as an organizer who has hope and who is trying to do better and working better with younger people, no matter how much frustration I might experience, I'm trying to do better and working with younger organizers. And one thing I want to impart to them is you have to have a comprehensive plan, because when the sentiment starts to wane and people just want to get back to work, okay, we back to work. They gave us 20 cents more an hour. They gave us $1 more an hour. We good. When people are satiated with just a little bit of quote unquote success, how do you keep people engaged in the fight without exhausting them? Because I get it. I relate to the desire to want to go back and resume life before the strike, right? Before this April through July strike. But there has to be a way we have to make sure that we finish and we tie it up, and not just be happy with a semblance of peace or return to normalcy or a resumption of life as we know it, as we once knew it. We've got to train people not to just be content with that, if that makes any sense, right? It's sad though. Yeah, Nicole. It's sad.
I want you to remember that nobody that I know come out of this thing. It makes a lot of people rich, a lot of people get good position, but the people that did the heavy lifting even get forgotten, and folk don't want to.
The one that got the real roller.
Yeah, the one that really make the stuff, made the sacrifice, put their lives on the line.
Rosa Parks.
Went to jail. I went to jail over there. During the hospital strike.
Mary Moultrie
was locked up over there. So it changed the whole idea of power. We made sure folk understand that we had some power.
Ida B. Wells.
The strike lasted in all for 113 days. It was 100 days for Medical University and 13 days later for county hospital.
The county hospital.
But the whole thing that the hospital worker was about is to make sure that we had people registered to vote. We wanted to do a supermarket. We wanted to get people to run for political office.
Yeah.
All of this stuff was a part of that package. And that's what came out of that strike. The whole state of South Carolina changed.
I would say that a lot of things came out of it. We got better working conditions.
Yeah.
We got people in positions who never would have been in positions.
That's right.
I went to Medical University several times because I was sick, and I noticed that we got numerous black RNs, young black RNs.
Yep.
And in 69, they only had one or two.
My mom, this is so funny. This is what shows you that racism and the practice of discrimination in the workplace is not a strictly Southern thing. And my mom, who had by the time she started pursuing a profession, pursuing a career in nursing and healthcare, she's in New Jersey. And she's trying. She's studying to be a CNA, but she's also trying to become an RN. And at that, from her account, whatever institution she was receiving her training from, or whatever certain bodies that existed, that would, I guess, usher in a new class of RNs, whatever it was, they routinely they had a quota, and so she never made it into the number. And it was always, from what my mom had shown, my mother was never ever extended an invitation or entree into RN training. And so she was never, what up, new follower? She was never able to pursue. Now, of course, growing up, she still worked at the hospital. She worked as a CNA. And she befriended a lot of black RNs, or a number of black RNs who did make it. But for her, the pathway was different. My mom has a thick North Carolina accent. I don't know if that contributed to the discrimination. I would venture to say it did. But then again, there was my classmate. Her mom is from Jamaica, and she was she was really light skinned and from Jamaica. So she had a Jamaican accent, but she was very, very light with light eyes. I don't know, but there were certain barriers to entry for my mother, who was brown skinned, unambiguously black, with a very thick North Carolina accent. But she just always told me as a child how they weren't taking a lot of black students into the nursing classes that she wanted to take part in. So I think about that. So, you know, the barriers, like, well, Mary Moultrie, I say all that because Mary Moultrie just offered up that when she went back to MUSC as a patient, one thing she noticed was more RNs and, you know, more black RNs. And that was a true accomplishment. I think a lot of black women who worked in the hospital at any level know how much of an accomplishment it was to see at this point in history more black RNs on staff.
The hospital strike was the beginning of people realizing what kind of power you can exercise if you stand up for what you believe is right. The Saunders, bars. And Miss Moultrie was the epitome of
I've never heard him speak.
So I would say that we made a lot of changes in the community, but it's a lot of changes that can be made. But we have to stand up for what we believe in. And once we stand up for what we believe in, others would stand with us.
One of the most important labor movements, oh, that's a good segue right there, Low Country Digital Library. One of the most important organizing efforts in the civil rights movement was this movement. They'll teach it now in this like type of with this retrospective perspective. This retrospective, they'll teach it now, but they'll teach it through like, oh, Coretta came here and marched and black women were given, no, it was 113 days. It was multiple healthcare institutions involved, multiple unions from all over the country involved. It wasn't just Coretta Scott came, marched, spoke at Morris Street Baptist Church and bounced. It was a lot. It was an economic boycott. They told black people not to shop on King Street. It was a multifaceted movement, a multifaceted labor movement that hit, as you heard Mr. Saunders say, they struck at the right time. They did at the height of tourism season. They essentially shut down Charleston at the height of tourism season. So that's an economic hit. They also told black people, unless it was medicine and groceries, do not shop downtown, do not shop on King Street. Hold your dollar. And they figured out how to feed and resource people to get around that, to make it a little bit easier for folks. There's so much organizing. So while it kind of relates to Clinton Smith's earlier point in terms of like, how do you measure success of a rebellion, of a slave rebellion? The same thing can be said for this. There were advances made, right? And the success shouldn't be on, oh, they didn't get a large enough wage increase. That's not how you measure success. You measure success by how, to me, you measure success by how you're able to really disrupt big tourism, that AIC. How do you disrupt the antebellum industrial complex? How do you make the white oppressive class, those who benefited from black labor and who built white wealth from black labor, how do you get them to rear up and like take notice and start changing the way they move, changing the way they talk, even if it's small changes? That's real success to me. And so I hope I didn't sound too sad or melancholy in talking about this. It's bittersweet, just like anything we talk about on this damn live stream. Nothing's absolutely just good and positive. Everything has nuance. Everything has these really funky contours that we gotta kind of peruse and navigate. And the hospital workers strike, the MUSC hospital workers strike led by black women, is just another example of how complicated this history is and how we should measure success. That's something I had to learn the hard way. All right. Shout out to Mrs. Louise Brown, living legend. Yes, Mrs. Louise. Oh, I wish I could find that video, Mrs. Louise. Mrs. Louise Brown, excuse me. Keep saying Louise. Mrs. Louise Brown. I wish I could find it. Oh. All right. So let's segue. What time is it? Oop, oop, oop. She is amazing. Still living, still kicking, all that. Let's go ahead and transition into the it's kind of hard. The Charleston Five thing is kind of hard because, so this is a documentary. Shout out to this Penn State PSU. Let me just click on the actual channel.
Do you have an audio or video project?
Boop, boop. All right, this is PSU. I want to say it's Penn State University Media Commons. Nope. Wait, what is this? Pittsburgh? What's PSU? Oh, right here, Mika Reed. How about you do that? How about you read? It is Penn State Media Commons. So this is where they did this documentary years ago. Let me go back to it. This is about the Charleston Five. Again, I shared this content. Shout out, let me pause it. Shout out Nick Rubin, who put me on the game. Not talked about enough. Shout out to my girl. Oh, I gotta call her back. She called me while I was on vacation in Brooklyn. Shout out to Crystal Rouse, who is the spouse of a member of the ILA union and also someone who works and organizes with the A. Philip Randolph Institute and with the ILA. And she served on the Special Commission on Race, Inclusion, Equity, and Conciliation. She worked on that. I know I just butchered it, but she worked on that as well. She put me up on game as well about this movement work. We'll play a little bit of this, but we're going to get to how they put down rebellion. I think that's what I want to try to skip the parts where we talk about how rebellion is put down, especially rebellion in the form of organized labor movement work. On Labor Day, you can't talk about Labor Day without talking about Charleston Five. Wait, hold on. Let me back up. Let me see what captions is here. Yeah. Okay. So here's the caption. I'm not going to increase it because we just want to. Documentary about the Charleston Five dock workers, produced by Andy Mazur, Louis Caza, Elizabeth Desmond. Okay. It doesn't even give you any much of more of a caption, but this is about the dock workers, the 5 dock workers who were arrested after the protest. Let's fast forward. So, we got to get a grasp of the issue.
Derived from men along the shore. Some folks confuse us with seafarers. We don't sail the ship. We are men along the shore waiting for the ship to come in. And in the old days, you could even hear the ship horn blow, and it sounds out throughout the community, and everyone knows ship's in port. We can probably go down there and get a job today, right? It's still pretty much like that, so to speak.
I got you.
Longshoremen here are really temporary workers. We get hired today, we get fired today. Once we have been released from work today, there is no guarantee that you'll work tomorrow. There's no guarantee that you'll work again. Fortunately, that's not the case. Your first challenge is to get a job. And if you secure the job, the lower your seniority, the chances are the harder the job. Because once guys get to where the seniority would afford them, a less arduous task, they'll get it. They know the easy ships. They know what job is, easier than the other. We don't stop for weather unless it's, very violent. We work and we don't stop for rain, anything like that.
Can work very labor intensive.
Very long hours, they may keep you out there all day to day and all night to night, But you do have the luxury to, we call it check out. At 4 o'clock, you can say, I'm done at 5, get somebody for me.
Come on.
And there are folks hanging around hoping that you will check out so they can at least get a half a loaf for the day. The one thing I loved about it on my career is on the docks is it's never boring and mundane because you're never going to do the same thing every day. And we have 6 different terminals, so you're even going to be at the same terminal every day.
All right, I'm going to fast forward so we get to more. I love listening to outlining the duties because that's, again, it's Labor Day. We need to talk about
that.
We need to talk about how labor intensive some of these jobs are. And that's what makes them so valuable and so important. But I wanted to get some more about the issue that arose.
Some 30 years. Even though we had experienced some degree of non-union infiltration into our work on the old manual style of work, never would we want to see that happen with containerization. Because again, that's our bread and butter. That's where we make our money.
So
that's where our benefits are funded through that most.
So non-union workers were making their way into the containerization, new term for some of us. And so non-union workforce was coming in. They were like, oh, hold up. Nah, that ain't going to happen. And you know, that doesn't just happen, y'all. Again, the state government has actively tried to break up unions like the ILA forever. And so if you do see certain issues crop up that kind of attack the existing union, you gotta put money on the fact that our state government leadership, our Republican state government leadership is encouraging it in some way, shape, or form.
So than anything else, because there's so much tonnage moving with that type of operation. And if we had allowed this one shipping company to go non-union, it would drive down the rates on all the other vessels and make it difficult to remain competitive with the with this one particular steamship line. We later found out that this steamship line was like a maverick. They didn't want to belong to any association, any group of shippers. They wanted to be able to do their own thing wherever they sailed. That posed a very serious problem for us. And so when they decided that they were not going to use unionized workers, the ILA, we knew that from day one we had to fight. So basically, we tried to meet with them, have discussions, let them know that this is going to be very problematic for us. Did everything we possibly could to negotiate with them. But they were determined, their minds were made up. Well, we knew right then we had to win.
So I'm gonna pause it there. So now you got a better understanding as to what the issue was. Yes, rest in peace to the legend right here. Just passed away. Hold on.
It's the last resort.
One of the companies here, a company coming out of...
I love this interview with him because not only is he a civil rights icon that we just lost last year, but he got Audre Lorde behind him. He got Maya Angelou, and I want to say that's Toni Morrison, but I'm not sure. But I know for a fact, you got Audre here, you got Maya here, and then over his head, I love a good union poster, y'all. I love a good union or pro-worker poster. Shout out to my homies that held me down in Brooklyn who had nothing but pro-union, pro-labor organizing posters all over their apartment. I love it. But rest in peace to the guy right here. All right, let's get to the part where we organize and we gonna strike. We gonna strike. We gonna stand up for our rights. We're gonna maintain control of the ports, of the docks. You know what I mean? We want to stand up for ourselves. We're members of the ILA. We got something to say, okay? How did we respond? We meaning the city of Charleston, the powers that be. I'm sure they got their directives again from high up in high up the rung of the ladder of state level government.
The need to reciprocate that type of communication when he realized that there was going to be 600 cops.
So they found out, so just to let you know, so they found out through their organizing efforts that 600 cops were about to mount up and to undermine their striking, right? To put down their striking. January 19th, year 2000.
This is a joint law enforcement operation that's scheduled to begin at approximately 16:30 hours today. The arrival of the ship is supposed to be somewhere around 1900 hours.
I'm amazed they take this.
It is the understanding of all public safety agencies involved that this vessel will begin work at approximately 1900 hours and sail from the port of Charleston on Thursday, 20 January at approximately 0700 hours. Now, what we've got in total.
So this is a response from the city of Charleston. We're going to deploy about 600 cops, 550 to 600 cops. We're going to deploy 550 to 600 cops to put down this labor movement, to put down this organized labor effort. We're going to deploy not deploy, 600 perhaps negotiators, not deploy some statesmen, some elected officials to make an appeal. Nope. Exactly to your point, Nicole, in the chat. Typical.
From those different agencies I've mentioned, we've got about 550 law enforcement officers.
It's crazy. That's crazy.
So our position in this is we want to have such a show of force. To project an image that we can't lose this battle tonight.
This is so problematic.
And it has all the potential of being a battle. But let me preface it by saying,
what y'all say? I think D, you said it, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. Whoever said that? I know that's like a popular cliche. But when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
this is not a battle that law enforcement can win. This is not going to be solved or settled on the Columbus Street Terminal tonight, the 28th when the next ship comes, or whenever the next ship comes. You communicate with our command post.
Nicole.
I'd like you to keep transmissions down to a minimal. If somebody's getting their ass kicked over at Immigration and Morrison Drive, they certainly don't want to hear that, that, hey, I need a relief over whatever location.
You hear that? Keep communication at a minimum.
Let's all of us come here healthy.
Don't talk over the walkie. Don't talk over the
It's going to rain tonight. We're going to get wet. It's going to be cold tonight. So we're going to be wet and cold, okay? Now, let's see what else we need to go over real quick.
A battle.
I'd actually sort of put it out of my mind until I saw these buses on the interstate.
Look at this. I showed this to my mom and pops.
Tour buses, until I came alongside them and saw that they were actually prison buses. And that's when it dawned on me that, wait a minute, ship tonight, prison buses headed to Charleston. This bus is for us.
Don't incriminate yourself.
And sure enough, by the time I got down to our headquarters, which was a little further down the street,
Joni, preach.
As far as the eye can see, there were cops everywhere. I mean, just
that's
everywhere.
crazy. Like it's
And so
a
I
battle.
went back into the hall, and we got with the other two presidents here in the port, and we started planning because I was amazed at the manpower. I mean, the resources that being.
Look at this.
And I know this was overkill, and I know this was to make us look.
And to make them look overkill, I'm taking the words out of his mouth, and also to send a message. And to your point, Jessica, 20 years later, nothing's changed, right? This is what I reminded folks of with these new ordinances that our spineless city council passed after listening to that propaganda from Chick-fil-A Chief Reynolds. Let's crack down on First Amendment rights more because somebody brought a gun to coming up with justifications and listening to this overblown characterization of what really happened in the summer, during the summer of 2020 during the George Floyd protests, right? No one is having a conversation about the police coming out with these armored vehicles, these freaking vehicles, similar vehicles you would find in war-torn countries where we are occupying, right? That we're occupying. Like, no one's talking about the tools that they use to put down rebellion. Outside of the buses and the number, the 600 number, I would say this is a similar response that the Taylors and the Britneys, faced. The girls with crop tops and yoga pants. This is what they faced this too. And that's bananas to me that's now seen as an appropriate response to either an organized action or an organized labor effort. That's bananas to me.
Look like,
overkill.
There's no need for us in this state. How dare these guys
get in your place, darky.
Cause the state to spend this kind of.
We're not going to take away the fact that this is a union led by black men, comprised mostly of black men. We ain't gonna take that out the equation. Again, when it comes to organized labor effort, especially, you can look right directly back at the MUSC workers strike. It's racial animus. It's racial animus that informs a lot of this anti-union sentiment. And not only do they not want the everyday working class, a working person, to earn a living wage, they also don't want black people to have equal footing economically because good and well. I just saw some stats yesterday when I was watching Ali Velshi. Don't judge me. I was watching Ali Velshi and they had some stats that I believe spoke to the racialized wealth gap here in America. And I'm like, yeah, the numbers are staggering in terms of what black people are able to amass in terms of wealth. inequity versus what our white counterparts can amass over a lifetime with either less education. A white high school dropout on average makes more money throughout their lifetime than me. Someone with a bachelor's and half a master's. I like saying half a master's. Half a master's don't count, but I like saying it. But a white person with far less education than myself can earn over their lifetime more than me statistically. And so when we talk about labor rights, when we talk about organized labor, when we talk about Labor Day, we got to talk about the racial animus that's also in this conversation.
Resources, overkill. And and I know we were not going to get nowhere near the ship, so
Come
we
on,
had a plan.
Chico the man, I see you.
We're not going to go down there that night, make them spend the money, but, just don't go down there. We'll come back midnight, reassemble, because certainly if they see we're not coming, they're going to cut that manpower in half. And they were doing that, but then they were, I guess, they were infiltrating our ranks, and everything we were saying was being radioed down.
Yeah, always a rat.
Line.
Like Chico the man, to your point earlier, is always. Was that you earlier that said that? There's always somebody in there trying to sell out. I hope that was you. I'm not giving you giving the wrong person credit. So yeah, I'm gonna fast forward to like what took place, what actually happened after he said and they said they had a strategy that didn't even include no type of confrontation. They just were not gonna show up, blah blah blah, do their thing, and here we go.
Immediately was.
I got you.
Bracing. Police would take their batons and sort of brace you back on the line.
Yeah, they got every right to walk to work.
Into the lines, and of course.
Every right to walk.
After it started to escalate, in my opinion, and
ain't no.
Some guys.
Look at this.
When they put the batons on their chest, the instinct that they'll grab the baton. They're one of these things. You have a shoving match, and
if these men are anything like my daddy, you touch that man, you put a fingernail on that man. That man gonna grab your shit and walk you back a couple steps. Even at 80, my dad do not play. Do not touch no grown ass black man.
And I saw where there was one policeman that was in a pulling match and with one of our guys, and our guys won. And he fell, and that started stirring it up a little bit. So, my role then was to defuse
when the police get vested
anywhere I can.
Oh, they don't like that.
It wasn't 15 minutes maybe at the most when we got the call that it was happening. It was fighting, And I know that was the last time I saw the other two presidents that night, because we just ran down the stairs, kept running, and by the time we turned down there, it was just a war zone. I've never been in the military, but I've been to war, because that was a war that night. And it was, by the grace of God, no one was killed, but a lot of people were injured, including myself.
So, my role then was to defuse it as anywhere I can. And what I decided to do, offer the guys, I said,
I'm just gonna fast forward just in the interest of time, just to show some
climb the fence
the footage.
Propel myself over it, and I'm
gonna fast forward just a little bit more. He's outlining what he got around the police shenanigans and climbed over a fence. I like how he said, propelled myself over it. Something about that. I can imagine that dude was like, "Look, adrenaline pumping. I'm gonna jump over this fence and get there." This is nuts, though. This is nuts.
The name of the street escapes me now. Immigration Street.
Immigration Street.
I had to jump over a guy laying over there with his head busted open. And so I'm getting to the front where all the fighting is going on, and I'm pushing people back, and I identify my officers, and I said, let's get everybody back
to the building. Initiated this confrontation.
And we were creating space in between the line of the police and our guys. And there were one guy that I know very well that was still entangled with the cop. It was one-on-one confrontation going on. And so I just ran and hit my guy in the chest with both hands and knocked him back, and looked to see if there was anybody else in trouble. So I looked around, and when I looked around, this guy came from nowhere and just wham, across the head. And someone had pointed me out that that's the guy responsible for all of it.
Wow,
and
wow.
I remember hearing that, and I remember my cousin was one that grabbed me under the arm when I got hit, because I had on a cap like I always do, and when I lift the cap, because I felt the crevice, and I lift the cap, and
the brutality is important. I just wanted to, again, get back to the police response, and then we're going to transition before I hop off to cigar workers real quick. I'm not going to do it justice, but want to lift it up.
It's going to be a war down here.
Going to be war. We already heard that phrasing. We already heard that language. I wanted to get some more. Yeah, this was sad. I can't even watch this part because my man right here lost so much during and after this melee. All right, here we go.
That we should have given them what
he's crying. I don't know if you can see the shine on his cheeks. Those are tears. Grown man crying is something else. This is why we need more independent media sources too. I don't know who filmed this. I don't know if it was the police. It feels like it was the police, and maybe they had to turn it over. Maybe they were like during discovery. But we need more independent news outlets to cover stuff like this. Shout out to the news outlets that were there covering it. But this story got suppressed like nothing I've ever read about here in Charleston. Look at that, y'all. I'll stop it there because we pretty much got a good example. So we saw helicopters. We know there's 550 to 600 cops. We see all those batons out, the SWAT gear. We saw the militarized vehicles. We saw all of that. That was in response to organized labor movement. All right. Before I dip, I wanted to pay homage to the legendary Cigar Factory strike. I invite you to go to LDHI, the Low Country Digital. Wait, hold up. Low Country Digital Library. Is that the same thing? Whatever. Yeah, go to ldhi.library.cfc.edu. Okay, and you can learn about all types of amazing, and they run a pretty decent Instagram account as well. That, you know, the content that they share will acquaint you with history, all kinds of history, not just history involving Black people. But it's important that you take some time and visit their page on the Cigar Factory strike. As you can see, is from 1945 to 1946. I think that time frame and some of the organizing even goes beyond 46. I'm not 100% sure. But this is, again, another Black-led movement. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Yep. Black-led movement, labor movement. Here is a picture. It says workers from the 1st, 4th, and 5th floors leaving their department meeting after work. Right. And so these are, and they organize with the FTA, Local 15. This inside the Cigar Factory. Let me see. This is the FTA news. So this is all about union working or unionized workers organizing for better conditions. Let me close it out. If you click on before, like it's a great timeline before the strike, like escalating tensions, all the organizing literature that they were able to save, the Charleston strike. And there was like a big movement around cigar factories in general, I learned yesterday, not just here in Charleston, but this is the iconic picture that folks like to share. Again, you see the workers here striking. It says picketing workers outside the cigar factory building in 19 45 in Charleston. So now we know this area is over here. It's a great venue for parties. Bar Mash is over there. What is it? Mercantile and Mash is over there, and a number of other shops are over there. But it's important to remember the amazing Black history. The song "We Shall Overcome" came out of this movement work. Here's the FTA Local 15. All right, here's some more work, right? I love this leaflet right here, if you can see it. It says it's calling for everyone to attend membership meeting tonight at 8:30 p.m. Morris Street Baptist Church. I'm sure there has to be a book written on how Morris Street Baptist Church was at the epicenter of so much civil rights and labor rights movement. Coretta Scott spoke from the pulpit here at Morris Street Baptist. There's a lot. The danger is now, later will be too late. A lot of the flyers that came out of the MUSC workers strike and here are like phenomenal. And it what it does, y'all, is up and coming, yes, up and coming city vibes. What it does is it dispels the myths that I think people are fed, that tell you that people, again, going back to Mr. Unwell, Mr. West, people who constantly question, what did we do? What did people do? Did they fight for themselves? Of course they fought. We've always fought. We've always resisted bondage. We've always resisted oppression. We've always fought back. And the flyers and the language used in the flyers, especially MUSC workers flyers, that shows you how strong of a fight they put up and how real the language got. I'm gonna switch to camera only because I'm about to dip. But yeah, it goes to show you how it disrupts that narrative that educators, like my history teacher in St. Andrews High School, he tried to indoctrinate us in saying that slaves were happy, they were content if they didn't run away, as long as they didn't run away, as long as they didn't rebel, they were content. And that's not true. And workers were not satisfied with these meager wages and these horrible conditions. No, and it's important to also know that Black people led a lot of these organized movements, these organized labor movements. And that's why it was important for me to start at Rebellion, start at Stoner Rebellion and other types of uprisings. It was important for me to start there and to end at Cigar Factory, end with the ILA strike. It's important that we don't just look at organized labor movements as things that existed after, like, at the height of the industrial period, right? We need to look at what people who are being exploited for their labor did to actively resist those conditions. And that's why you have to start in the plantation. And that's where modern day capitalism, right? A lot of our attitudes and a lot of the norms and practices that we all participate in are part of capitalism. They're cogs in the machine that keep capitalism moving forward. And so it's important for us to look at the birthplace of capitalism here in this country, which is the plantation. Here in America, we have some of the most severe capitalistic conditions in the workplace. You might think that the fringe benefits are great at your job, maybe because you have beer on tap on a rooftop bar at your job. You know, I'm thinking of all the techie places, but those are just incentives to keep you at work, right? When people talk about, oh, Google has a gym and Google over this tech firm or this tech company in Silicon Valley has beer on tap and they have a cereal bar, that's to keep you at work. And that's fucked up. So like, we have to really start to think and unpack what capitalism, how it shaped our attitudes towards labor, how it shaped our attitudes in terms of what we value, what kind of labor we value. Why do we diminish other types of labor that are more physical or labor intensive, and where you deal with your hands? Why are we calling that unskilled, right? Why are we creating these class distinctions where there need not be any? We have to look at the origins of capitalism to really unpack that. So even the benefits that we enjoy, some of our benefits, I feel like even at my former employer, there was these really encouraging conversations around benefits and what that could look like. And largely that was just the way they kind of hook you in. because they didn't practice what they touted as their beliefs. I'll stop. No, I won't. Shit, fuck it. But when I look at some of the encouraging conversations around benefits and the benefits package that was extended to myself, it makes you think about like what's a benefit versus what really just keeps you working around the clock, right? I'm not saying that that's what was going on in my previous employer. That's actually not a grievance I have. But when you look at these other places, what's touted as like these ultimate like fringe benefits are really just inducements to keep you working. You feel me? I don't dream of labor is what Joni says. Absolutely. Thank you, Joni. I'm running on. Okay, I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret. I actually enjoyed today's show. I felt very clear-minded. I felt very organized because I did organize. I was watching 60 Minutes yesterday and making sure I had everything lined up and making sure that, because I know some people think that it's a reach when I do things like talk about slave rebellion and link it to Labor Day. I know people are going to say, oh, that's a reach, but I really do hope I made that connection. And if I didn't, give me feedback as to where you think that there were some holes in that. But I feel clear-minded. I ain't gonna lie. I had a coffee. I had a cold brew with espresso. I might, that's the double-edged sword because I know I'm gonna be up like this all night. Like no matter how I started drinking that shit at 5:00, best believe I'll be up all night. Thank you, Chico the Man. Thank you, KCJ18. Thank you, Whiskey Neat. Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciated y'all. Oh, real quick, just so you know, I also understand I had fun this weekend. Shout out to my cousins. My lower back is screaming right now because I didn't even save the video for you. Maybe I'll show it tomorrow. But yeah, so my cousins, shout out to Claire, shout out to cousin Adrian. They threw a party for my other cousin who just graduated, got her master's in public health. Shout out Juliet. Juliet got her master's in public health from Alabama. Roll Tide. I don't care. Y'all know it's professional sports. I'll say Roll Tide because my cousin graduated from Alabama. Even though my cousin Claire graduated, she's an engineer from Clemson. Anyway, Alabama grad, public health. And so they wanted to celebrate all the September birthdays. And also like all of my little cousins was there. And so they rented a 2-story water slide, right? So this is my right hand. That needs a manicure, I will admit. This is my left hand. Y'all, when I tell you my big ass climbed under the pressure of my cousins, climbed, I look crazy, climbed this 2-story slide that's built for children and not women with size 10 feet who are over 200 pounds. And my dad was there. And of course, I'm like, look, daddy, did you see me? I literally, almost literally said that. I'm like, Dad, did you see me? I'm climbing the slide under pressure. And when I tell you my nails ripped clean off, like just ripped off. Yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed fun. It was fun. It was like, I really had a lot of fun. My cousins are great. It's great. That's the good part about moving down here is being closer to your cousins your age and your little cousins who don't know that you're 40 because you keep acting like a kid. They were like, Uncle Dan is your dad? I'm like, yeah, I'm 40. It was fun though. 2-story slide. My lower back is on fire. It was fun. Yeah. Oh my God. I don't know how y'all like water up y'all nose and in y'all ears. I can't take it. Anyway, you said, okay, Miss Jessica, you said you flew out of the pool. Yo, I almost did. Like that pool at the bottom. I said, let me come down as if I'm like at Dorney Park. Shout out to people who know what Dorney Park is. I went down like this, like it was like some big slide. And I was like, Lord, please don't let me bounce out of this little pool at the bottom. Cause it was like a bullet. You went down that thing like crazy. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed y'all weekend. I hope you are enjoying some rest today. Seriously, get some radical rest. We talked a lot about capitalism. I hope there was some joyful moments in there. That's why I always introduce levity when I can, even if it don't make sense, even if it's somewhat inappropriate. This stuff, sometimes it can get heavy. And so I appreciate you. Keep an eye out. Please, thank you so much for your support with the newsletter, with the subscriptions, with Patreon. It's a small milestone for others, but for me, it's a major milestone. I just hit the over $600 amount on Patreon. I've been doing Patreon for a minute. I'm sure other people are very much more successful, but maybe they're more disciplined and more organized on Patreon. But that support is super important to me because I lost my job. But it's important to me because it really does show that y'all care about my work. I know I'm talking a lot, but thank you so much for my new patrons and my big patrons and my small ones. I really hope that y'all sign up for the newsletter. I will not inundate you. Yes, you'll get probably one email a day, but it won't be crazy. It'll be early in the morning just to tell you what's up. You know what I mean? Please sign up so we can keep building this out. T-shirts are coming. A second batch is coming. We doubled the size of the next batch. I've got one double XL left, I think. Yeah, one double XL left if you want to cop that. But that's it. And if you're a little shorty doo-wop like Nicole, maybe you can wear it as a nightgown. I don't know. but we got the sizes coming back. So we got more sizes coming back soon as Wes prints up the next batch. And so look out on the next newsletter. I'm going to be talking about where you can find Jared, who's performing live at the end of this week. I want y'all to go out and support Jared because Jared supports me so much. And I can't say thank you enough. He won't take no money. He's just really thorough. And really there for me, and he's my COO. So shout out to Jared. I want to make sure y'all support him at the Poorhouse. I'll put that in probably tomorrow's newsletter. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for the feedback. I love feedback, y'all. I love it. I love it. Like a lot. Make sure you wrap it in care, but I love it. All right, take care of yourself. Yeah, y'all sending me so much love. Yeah. Oh, it's hoodie season. We getting the hoodies. I'm gonna be so enthusiastic about the hoodies. We gotta do an antebellum industrial complex hoodie. I think that's next up. I think y'all just made it. All right. Have a good day, y'all. Get some radical rest. And I mean, give capitalism the finger. Give capitalism the finger. If you got nails, give it the finger today. Take a rest. Leave your hoe in the dirt. All right. Leave your hoe in the dirt. Bye.